Serious, murder attempt survivors of Reddit. Who has had an attempted murder upon them? How did you survive? Then husband and I were arguing, sitting side by side on the couch. Suddenly, he grabbed me by the throat. I struggled to pry him off of me and fell off the couch. He then straddled me and continued choking me. I tried to get leverage, but he was 80 plus lbs heavier and 5 inches taller and I couldn't get purchase. I remember blacking out and feeling so this is it, I guess. Not quite peace but not fear. Came to gagging and coughing. Apparently me passing out scared him. He never apologized. The marks took ages to fade. And yes, I left him later. My brother, 6, and I, 9, were playing games in our computer room, which was at the back of our house, when our next door neighbor, 20-ish male, came over and said he needed us to go to his place for something. We sort of knew him. Our dad had hired him to do some work, and so he wasn't a total stranger to us, so we went. He took us into his bedroom, bound our hands and tried to stuff socks into our mouths to gag us. He pulled out a knife and tried to threaten us. We didn't understand the weight of the situation even then, because he asked me, "Do you know what this means?" and I joked, "You're going to cook something in the kitchen." He then grabbed me and pulled me onto the floor and tried to smother me. When he realized I was still getting some breaths in, he switched to strangling me. I remember kind of giving in and telling myself it's okay. Mum and dad are going to give me a good funeral, and then saw my brother standing at the door saying he was scared and he wanted to leave. I begged him to stay and he did, which is something I will never forget and has made such a hugely positive impact on our relationship. At that point it clicked in my mind that once I was dead he was going to kill my brother too. So I started to fight the hardest I had ever fought. I bit and scratched and threw my body around and knocked a large stereo down that made enough noise for his parents to come in. They were home the entire time. They untied us, took us home, and his dad dropped to his knees and begged my mum not to call the police. Obviously she completely ignored his request and called. In the end they found carving knives, industrial plastic bags and other equipment to dispose of our bodies in his room. To this day that is the closest I have ever come to dying. Jesus. Personally I find this one of the worst ones on here. I guess because it's so close to home and easy to imagine happening. I'm glad you guys were okay. That must have been terrifying. Your instincts kicked in hard there. An ex beat me nearly to death and stabbed me twice. I remember the point where I let myself pass out because I thought I wasn't going to survive. It was the coldest day that year in the province, and the middle of the night. A jogger found me in the middle of the park, blood everywhere. He thought I was dead at first. 3 days in a coma, hypothermia, a list of injuries that are so horrific I don't like thinking about. If he hadn't had insomnia and went running at 3 AM I would have died. The jogger ended up becoming a big part of my life. I see him for a nice dinner twice a year. My parents paid off his student loans. I regularly send gifts to the trauma team that took care of me. That's really nice of your parents to pay off his loans and that you keep in touch and get dinner occasionally. My dad's girlfriend always hated me. She would constantly talk about putting me in foster care and would treat me very differently to how she treated her own kids. This happened when I was around 5 or 6. I woke up one night incredibly overheated and finding it really difficult to breathe. I was choking on the majority of my quite long and thick hair and had been covered up in several layers of thick blankets. My body, not my fave. I looked up and I remember her just standing there in the semi-dark room, watching me struggle with no expression on her face. As I started to struggle a little more I woke up her son, who was sleeping on the floor in the same room. Suddenly she changed and started to pull the hair out of my mouth and helped me to sit up. She got me a glass of water and told me I was lucky she came in because a ghost had shoved my hair down my throat and she was saving me. My dad took me to a doctor the next day for an asthma attack and I was given an inhaler for the next week. The fricked up thing is, because I was so young I didn't really put together what happened until I was much older. She never tried again, but she was horribly abusive. I cut all contact with her around age 13 and with my father at 19. Some people are just pure freaking evil. My mother tried pretty dang hard when she was alive. Worst thing was that was 4 of us in all, but I was the only one she hated because I looked like dad. Pills, pushing me out a window, from a boat, leaving the house with everyone else at night with the front door open and me alone. This was a very bad area. She tried constantly to kick me from home. This carried on from the age of 5 till I was 8 and she successfully managed to kill herself instead. Ended up going to dad who she kicked out of the house years beforehand, and after some pretty heavy therapy ended up pretty normal. Considering how my siblings turned out, I'm the lucky one. Gotta admit though, it never went in my head I might die. I just accepted it. Kinda hopped for it, no matter what she did. At night when she was crying alone in the front room, I was the only one who went to comfort her. Looking back, I'm glad I at least tried, but dang, I don't care what her problems were. I hate that woman to this day. My stepmother's my real mother as far as I'm concerned. In high school, my cousin and I were at the public pool. We were swimming in the deep end and just chatting. We'd never really been close, and we used to hate each other in middle school. But we'd kinda made amends and I was trying to be friendly. He tells me to swim towards the deep end and I do. I have never been a strong swimmer. He follows me and puts his hand on my shoulder. I thought he was just letting me know he wouldn't let me go under the water. Suddenly he grabs me, puts me in a full Nelson and dunks me underwater. I wasn't expecting this and I took in a lungful of water. He holds my there for a while and eventually brings me back up, lets me cough, then puts me back under. He does this a few times and every time he brings me up, I don't have time to cough out the water to breathe. I thought I was going to die. It was fairly late in the day so there wasn't a lot of people around to witness this. Luckily my sister happened to walk by and called out for me. My cousin lets me go and I pathetically doggy paddle to the side. My sister sees that I'm having trouble breathing and pulls me out of the water. I looked back at my cousin and he didn't even look mad or anything. He just looked at me and watched me leave. I still see him every now and then at family reunions and such. I've never talked to him since. Everyone in the family loves him and the only person who knows what he tried to do to me is my sister. The family needs to know about this. I'll keep it short. Hanging out at my favorite bar around age 19. Saw an old friend's band play. I was hanging with another friend, Kevin, earlier. Kev is a big burly hockey player, so I hadn't been hit on by other dudes all night. But Kev had to leave to work the next day so I was all alone near the night's end. Waiting for my tab alone at the end of the bar and an old man in a weird hat comes up to me. I'd seen him staring before during the show. "Hey sweetie, your boyfriend in the band?" "Yep, you are totally. I'm dating the drummer." "Why?" "Go me. Good lie. I'm gonna fight him for ya." He kept on with that train of thought. It took a little convincing to get the guy not to fight my not boyfriend. After a minute, he gets extremely irate, growls, and stomps straight out of the bar. Weird, right? Turns out he'd roofied my drink an hour prior when I was hanging with Kevin, but Kevin and I swapped beers somehow. Kev nearly crashed his car on the way home, had to be driven the rest of the way as he got woozy, threw up in his yard before passing out in his own vomit, and his roommates had to carry him in and shower him before bed. He was unconscious but alive for the next 16 hours, through 8 hours of his alarm clock beeping and through his whole work shift. He'd had just that one beer. The man was checking to see if the drugs kicked in, and realized he'd wasted them when I was still alert enough to argue. If I, at 120 pounds, had gotten that beer, instead of 260 pounds Kevin, I know I would have been a pretty corpse that night. I got in a fight outside of a club in Charlotte, NC one time. The guy went at my neck. I thought it was a punch so I put my hand up to block it. He had a knife. I didn't know. I didn't feel anything at the time, but when he hit my hand he took off running. I chased him for about 3-5 seconds before I realized my hand looked like I was wearing a red glove, covered in blood. Good thing is where he hit me was below my thumb, in a fatty tissue area, so no serious damage at all. It just bled a lot. Nothing life-altering about it. Imagine how hardcore it would have looked as you still chased him down with a handful of blood. When I was about 12, I was swimming in a lake at our cottage. Another family was renting the cottage next to ours for the summer. A younger, but bigger, girl was part of that family. She joined me in swimming and kept pushing me under the water. At first I thought she was just messing around, but she started holding me under for longer and longer, even though between gasping, watery coughs, I was begging her to stop. I remember feeling helpless and like there was nothing I could do. She was stronger than me and I couldn't get away. My throat and eyes and nose were stinging. It was horrible. For whatever reason, she stopped and I ran to shore, crying the whole way, hoping I was faster than her and never looking back to see if she was gaining on me. When I told my mom what happened, she assured me the younger girl was just trying to play. No one ever legitimized how terrifying that experience was. This is a really long story, but I'll try to keep it short. This was about 4 years ago and I had just left my very abusive ex via being chased out of the house with a shotgun. He stole my car and I was running down the street calling a friend of mine to come rescue me. I'm running down my street. Come get me. Now I'm scared for my life at this point, and the next thing I know I hear the tires screeching of a car. My car. And I'm going over the car. I was going in and out of consciousness and my ex and one of his buddies steps out. My ex has a tire iron and his buddy has a steel bat. They started beating me ruthlessly as I laid there in the middle of the street, completely unable to do anything but attempt to cover my face. I vaguely remember the neighbors coming outside and tackling both of them while another called 911. I couldn't breathe by this point and I was begging over and over again in my head for them to please just end me. I couldn't take the pain anymore. I woke up in the hospital after 6 days of being in a coma and was asked to give a report shortly afterwards. I really don't remember a whole lot of that experience aside from getting the absolute crap beat out of me and wanting so desperately to just die. I don't exactly remember the point where I knew I was a goner, but it was probably about the time I saw them both step out with a bat and a tire iron. TLDR. I got the crap beat out of me with a bat and a tire iron about 4 years ago and I somehow managed to remain conscious enough for the neighbors to come to my rescue. I woke up in the hospital 6 days later. I am a survivor of kidnapping, brutal assault and rape. The first time I regained consciousness I accepted that I was going to die because of the immense pain and fear. I begged for days on end to be killed. Eventually my captors became fearful of the investigation and I was released in public. Naked and drugged, I spent the next few years in a heavily medicated blur wishing I had been dead. My recovery has mentally and emotionally been brutal and even 16 years later I still suffer every single day, but I am finally so thankful to be alive. I'm thankful you are alive as well. While this wasn't technically an attempt on my life, I did accept my death as a kid. My mom had a prescription pill problem. She took a lot of morphine, soma, etc. Lots of opiates and muscle relaxers. She was super fricked up pretty much all the time, but that didn't stop her from insisting on driving me around. She would pick me up in a stupor and drive extremely recklessly. One moment that stands out in my memory is when she was driving 90 miles per hour down the freeway, heading straight for totally stopped traffic. And when she was just meters away she would slam on her brakes as hard as she could and skid to a stop behind the car in front of her. I was so petrified and felt so powerless in the car. So I just told myself that if I was going to die, it would be easier if I didn't have to see it coming and would just close my eyes and try to relax. I was around 7 years old, had a serious fear of cars for a long time after I finally didn't have to be at her mercy. Sorry, your mom's a C. A girl tried to gut me because I stopped letting pizzas get delivered to her local shithole of a community. The TLDR is that people kept getting mugged, assaulted, and I quickly became the only person with enough stupidity to keep delivering there. Eventually one of the people held me at gunpoint so he could get a free pizza, and I decided that it wasn't worthwhile to keep them in our delivery range even though a good chunk of our orders came from there. A few days later the big boss of that ghetto called our shop and told us that we were stupid and that we should keep our eyes peeled for his boys. I told him to get fricked and told him to expect a visit from the police. Anyway, the dude gets arrested for threatening harm and a bunch of other crap like drugs. As a bit of background, there are 2 housing authorities, like a bunch of government subsidized cookie cutter apartments, in my town. One on each side and both of them have gang ties and they both hate each other. I just a white boy who needed a cheap place to live, so I was out of place and they thought I was keeping pizza from them due to gang reasons. Anyway, a girl knocks at my door and tells me that she bought some wine but forget to buy a wine opener and wanted to borrow mine. I told her I have one, but it's the weird wall mounted one that my dad made. It's like a weird box with multiple inserts for opening things. In this case the wine opening one is this small electric one that will drill into the cork and you can just pull it out. So I take the bottle and turn around and walk to the kitchen, and as I'm walking I hear the sound of a pocket knife. You know, that classic whip sound. So I whip around and look at her. We stared each other down for what felt like forever, and then she started moving towards me and talking crap about how I got her boo arrested and now she has to take care of 3 kids alone and how hard it is pushing dope without her boyfriend around. Eventually, I snapped out of my Dirk and no hurt laddie mindset because I realized it was her or me, and I chose me. So I took a step back, grabbed the wine bottle by the neck, and whacked her upside the head. She crumbled to the floor and blood started to pool around her. Cops were called and an ambulance came. I was carted off to the good old county jail because it was a small town and they couldn't prove my side of the story, but they did believe it. I told my boss what happened and he paid my bail. I went back to work and started taking double shifts so I could pay back the total bro move my boss did. The boss got me in contact with a good lawyer and I was found not guilty on the grounds of self-defense. Neighbor had a camera near his door that could see inside of my house if my door was open and it caught everything. It wasn't the greatest quality, but there was no mistaking what happened. TLDR. I almost got ganked because pizza. Good on you knocking her upside the head. My buddy K wasn't as smart. Let some Rondo bar chick stab him twice without trying to defend himself. A drug dealer attacked me with a crowbar in his house because I objected to him throwing his cat off the wall. He jumped on me, bit me, then ran out of the room. He returned moments later with a crowbar. I ran out of the house with no shoes. Didn't have time to put them back on. I ran down the street. It's about a mile long. No houses. It runs in the middle of a field with an old monastery on it. He gave chase with a freaking knife. I was so unfit at the time, it was horrific. No one would stop their cars and help. Understandably, I ran into the field to try and hide because I couldn't run anymore. I was stumbling down a little ankle-deep stream with no shoes on. I couldn't breathe and all I could hear was him closing in on me. The sound of the stream, my own breath and closing footsteps behind me, in the middle of nowhere. I thought if I don't get back on that road right now, I am going to die here. I turned and made a run for the road. I got there and kept running. I couldn't breathe. It was just adrenaline. I ended up bursting through the door of a rough as frick awful little pub. The barmaid let me use the phone. I'd left my mobile in dealer's house. Everyone in the bar thought it was hilarious. The dealer burst in after me and told everyone I had just smoked weed for the first ever time and was freaking out and that he'd take me home and make sure I was okay. Some people realized what was really happening at this point and told him to frick off. My dad came and picked me up. This was the start of me turning my life around. This happened 11 years ago. Good job for sticking up for the cat. My ex-boyfriend suffocated me until the point I passed out and almost succeeded in killing me. He had gotten angry at me during an argument, and when I tried to call the police because he was getting violent, he took my phone from me and forced my head face down into a pillow while he was screaming that he would kill me before he would let himself get arrested. Somewhere about 3-4 minutes in, I started to lose consciousness and thought that I was going to die. After 3 hours of him holding me captive, I managed to convince him to let me use my computer, since you can't dial 911 from a PC, and managed to Facebook message a friend who called the police for me. Thank the fricking gods your ex was an idiot. I got attacked in New Zealand, my home, by 3 kids under 17. They were gang affiliates of one of the big Maori gangs and I guess looking to earn their stripes. One was just throwing punches, one had a flathead screwdriver and was trying to stab me with it, and one had a small wood hatchet. Long story short, got a scrape in my side from the screwdriver and managed to throw myself sideways as the hatchet was swung into my head. It glanced off my temple, smashed my glasses to pieces leaving me practically blind, and I managed to run. They were all caught and because of their age were treated like the victims. They were all charged with common assault and had to pay restitution for my spectacles, which I never received. I was pretty incredulous at the time. I said to the police that if I hit someone in the head with an axe I would be charged with attempted murder. They just shrugged. Their age mate. Never get a conviction. I followed up 10 years later and one was dead from a car accident while and the other 2 had done time in prison for violent assaults and 1 rape. If the authorities had taken your assault seriously, those other victims might never have been hurt. In college, I woke up to someone on top of me in my apartment. I lived alone. The guy had his pants off and a knife pointed directly to my head. The memories of that night aren't really clear. He threatened to kill me multiple times. I remember crying. All I know is that at one point, he pulled the knife back as to prepare to stab me. Instinct kicked in and I grabbed it. I don't know if I scared him off because my hand was bleeding extremely bad, severed tendons and muscles on 3/5 fingers, or what, but I didn't ever really accept that I was going to die. I knew it was an option, not one I was choosing if I had any say in it. The guy ended up helping me get paper towels to wrap my hand up, demanded money, and left. Later found out he hung himself. He left a suicide note that he hung himself because the girl fought back. All I have to say about that incident is that PTSD sucks. Big time. That's so horrible and I'm sorry that happened to you. When I was 9 years old, my mother's boyfriend at the time tried to suffocate me in a container of ice cream. He was a piece of crap that had already been beating on my mom and I for a couple years. She was working and I was told I could have 2 scoops after dinner. I took 3 scoops, cause I was 9 and liked ice cream. And when he noticed, he completely lost his dang mind, screaming and throwing things around. He grabbed the ice cream from the fridge, dragged me by my hair to the bathroom and proceeded to scream at me about following the rules and this is why you are such a fat butt while holding my head down in the ice cream tub until I eventually passed out. It was only a day or so after that when he decided to hang up on my father when he called to talk to me. This resulted in my father, my uncle and 2 police officers showing up, and me moving in with my father, who was only verbally abusive instead of physical and verbal. I'm sorry. I was 14 and with a few friends, A, J and M, when we decided to buy some marijuana from a kid a couple years older than us we knew from school, X. We went to his house, made the deal and went to Jay's house. Some time later, about an hour or so, there is pounding on the door and Jay looks through the peephole. Yo, it's X. I come to answer the door with Jay and the second the lock was undone, the door flies open. Jay took the entire force of the door and got crushed between it and the wall. Several older guys rush in and I am pulled out, slammed on the ground and there's a hand around my throat. As the life is being choked out of me, I gather the choker is X's older brother. X had something stolen from him and we are held responsible. Everything was happening so fast and the blood wasn't getting to my brain so I can't recall everything clear, but I remember the last 10 seconds. Friend A was tending to Jay, who ended up with 5 broken ribs, a broken wrist, broken jaw and a dislocated knee, while M ran and got Jay's father's hunting rifle. X's brother looks at M holding this gun in the doorway of the house and says, "You freaking pee. You won't shoot. You'll just watch as I kill this kid." When he looked back down at me, I saw pure psychotic rage in his eyes. Then he screamed and fell off me. Did M shoot? No, but he's beside me now waving the gun and everyone backed off except X's brother, who is screaming and holding face and there's blood all over me and him. Then I notice my hand is burning bad. Apparently, I grabbed my keys out of my pocket and holding them in my fist like some kind of claw, I slammed them into his face. My hand hurts because the keys tore my hand up, but all this blood isn't mine. The entourage of X grabs the brother and they retreat quickly, speeding off in their vehicles. Jay and I visit the hospital. He stays for 5 days as they treat his various injuries and I escaped with a small scar on my left index finger from a few stitches. X's brother was also there and my family got his injury report directly from his mother. 3 lacerations and a broken cheek that require reconstructive surgery. Lost most vision in his right eye. Perforated eardrum. 6 shattered teeth and a cracked jaw. The key to my first car had a 6mm piece of the tip break off and lodge into his jawbone. This happened 18 years ago, was even at another person's house, and I still keep a weapon by the triple locked, reinforced door for when I answer it. The sound of hard knocking can trigger anxiety attacks sometimes. All in all, I escaped alive and with a minor physical injury, but I still live with the trauma inflicted that day. My husband was held up at gunpoint in broad daylight in a very touristy area while I was on the phone with him. The kid was trying to steal his iPhone. My husband said his instincts took over and he just started running around the guy in circles while shouting to draw attention. He didn't turn and run as he'd have been an easy target. The kid finally got confused and ran off. At the end of an 8-month program in a film school, one of my best friends and me decided to do acid the last night to celebrate, but my friend insisted on doing 4 stamps each, and he paid for everything. We had done a fair amount before this together, so it was not totally abnormal, but still a bit much. 3 hours into it, he starts to block all the exits and I realize he is acting manic. But I'm on a fuckload of acid too and seem to be drifting in and out of consciousness as this guy starts to talk about the view from his 18th floor and takes me to the window. I zone in when I'm almost out the window and realize he has been trying to convince me to jump and was now resorting to physical pressure. I panicked and was in total fear since I could see the crazy in this guy's eyes, grabbed my things and rushed out of there in the acid haze. As far as whether I accepted death, nope. The moment I was lucid enough to understand what was happening, I got the fuck out. There was a kid in high school woodshop who, though it would be cool to see someone get fricked up by the table saw, he would regularly wait for people to use it, then come up behind them with an air compressor hose and blast it in their ear or on the back of their head while the saw was being used. Obviously everyone flinches. Plenty of people would duck away from it and almost hit the blade with their face or flinch and almost run their hand or arm through the saw. We had told the teacher a few times, but he never believed anyone was that malicious. This went on for weeks. Eventually he stopped using the air compressor and just started pushing people. And then I was that person. The kid waited out of the room until I turned it on and started running a large piece of plywood through the table saw, then came over and pushed my head down. My face actually got close enough to the blade that it scraped my goggles. The blade wasn't set high enough that I would have died. I would have lost my eye and had some pretty awful damage though. I don't really remember getting that close to the bleed. It happened so fast that by the time I figured out what was going on it was over. The teacher saw it, I guess, and the kid was removed from the class, but that was it. When I was around 7, there was an older neighbor boy that my father insisted I be friends with, as his dad and mine would do drugs together. The kid was touching me and I wanted it to stop, as it had been going on for around a year and was escalating in a way that even a very sheltered child could recognize as very bad, and I'd seen enough violence that I could all but smell what he was going to do. I threatened to tell, and while it's very fuzzy here, I think he started to suffocate me, but my dad started calling for me when this was going on and he let up but threatened to kill my mother if I ever told. And as my father had tried to strangle my mom to death in front of me before, I believed this boy when he said it. That's horrible. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I don't know what she was trying to do or when she would have stopped, but my mother-in-law snapped and jumped me one day. She'd called to ask if I'd go get her prescription, 20 minutes from my house, and bring it to her, 30 minutes back the other way. I was low on funds and had my nephew we'd taken in to provide for, so I made sure she said she'd have the money to give back to me for the script and a few dollars in gas. When I got there, she was all crazy looking. Not unusual, but off enough for me to notice it was worse than normal, and I handed her the script and asked for the money. She didn't answer and pushed past me to go to the car, where my baby nephew was sleeping. I came up behind her and asked what was wrong, and she said, "My grandson's not going anywhere with you, you little s." I said, "Whatever, Kathy, you obviously just don't have the money and now you're trying to turn it around like I did something wrong. This after I drive all over and deliver your meds to you, but fine." I had gotten into the front seat and buckled up, but the car was running. I'd never turned it off. She grabbed my ponytail from behind and started punching the back of my head. It took time to get the car in park and get out of the seatbelt, but when I did, we brawled. She's also a huge woman. Very tall. IDK if she clears 6 feet, but she's close. Maybe 280 pounds. I was 5 feet 2 inches and 120. She got on top and tried to choke, and I grabbed a fistful of hair, snatched her head down and held it while I punched with the other. I think it was then that I broke my wrist, but I didn't know it then. Finally, my nephew's mom, Kathy's daughter, comes out and screams, and she finally gets off. But the whole time it was like the lights were on but no one was home in her eyes. She may very well have kept going if no one had been around to snap her out of it, and while she, the cops and everyone else would say I gave as good as I got the worst of it and she attacked me. She got up and went in the house and I went to the car and tried to get the baby. When I went to undo the straps, I realized my wrist was injured. Someone had called the cops. I won't get into all that, but I ended up having to have surgery for pins and screws in my wrist and it still hurts regularly. I haven't laid eyes on her since court and never will again. My husband was humiliated and just devastated. Every time I cried, he cried harder. His stepmom told me that before his grandmother, she told her that when my husband was a baby she walked in on Kathy trying to smother him. B is certified crazy and should be locked TF up. I was in an abusive relationship when I was 19 and 20. My abuser tried to kill me a few times. The last time he attempted to throw me down the stairs and I fought back, so he stomped on my face. It was my 20th birthday. He stomped on my face and arms and kicked my body. I don't know what made him stop, but I remember thinking this is how I die. I remember thinking that and jolting back to reality, forcing myself to stay awake and not pass out. I remember running out of the house with my phone and my laptop and my wallet. I remember my uncle pulling up and taking me to the hospital. I survived with a broken orbital bone and some pretty bad trauma. There were days he'd wave a gun in my face, but it wasn't as bad as that night. I don't know how I survived. I don't know how I got out. I don't know how I was brave enough to leave him, but I did. I turned 21 last week, and I survived, and I'm thriving. My ex-girlfriend hit me in the head with a clothes iron, giving me 13 stitches. She wasn't charged with attempted murder, but after she hit me I turned around and she was swinging the fricking thing over her head by the cord. I think an argument could have been made for attempted murder. Dang, what led to the fight? Probably will get buried, but I'm fairly certain someone on a dark rural road was trying to pull me over and kill me. I was driving back from New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama around 10 p.m. Just empty roads for miles, pitch black. Then this black car comes up behind me, passes me going really fast. No big deal, but then the car starts to slow down. Okay, this guy is a crappy driver. I speed up to go around him. Maybe he got a text or something. But when I try to pass him, he gets in front of me again and slows down even more. Then I try to pass on the other lane. Again, the car slows down even more and gets in front of me. I can't pass, and at this point and we are both going like 10 miles per hour. 5 mph. Then dead fricking stop. Middle of the highway. Pitch black. Long, straight stretch of road. No street lamps. Nothing but fricking swamp and river around. Bumblefuck nowhere. The door starts to open. I wait a moment, then scream around the car, dipping in the grass on the side of the road, hoping I don't hit debris that gives me a flat tire or something. This sucker closes the door and starts speeding after me. I check my phone and this is back in like 2008, where I wasn't cool enough to have a kick-ass smartphone. I just had a typical flip phone with AT&T and I had no bars. It was like a bad horror movie trope. This car manages to pass me again and starts slowing down again. The car got me to a dead fricking stop about 3 times, and 3 times I managed to speed around. This cat and mouse crap went on for a good 25 to 30 minutes. Finally, we started to come up on some aspects of civilization. The road widened up, some streetlights appeared, an intersection crept up and this guy dropped back, took an exit, and I didn't see him again. The car was black. The windows were tinted. I have never been more scared and freaked out in my life. Bought a gun after that. Got training. Never leaves my fricking side. All I could think was, if this guy manages to get out of that car, I have nothing to defend myself with. This happened to my cousin. The police who responded when she called told her that even when she doesn't have a weapon, her car is a weapon. I know it's hard to realize in your panic, but you could have effectively run him over. I was abused, molested, and tortured by an ex. It was early summer 2011, and me being the naive kid I was, decided to shack up with an older guy because he could clothe and feed me in exchange for sex and chores around the house. Things went well for the first few weeks before he started getting physically abusive. Well, one night he decides to host a party and he blindfolds and cuffs my hands together. At this point I thought I'd just wind up displayed for a while till the party ended. I was wrong. He bound my cuffs to a pipe in a walk-in style shower he had. It was a disability bar. I spent 13 days bound in that shower, being used and beaten by him and no telling how many other men on a daily basis. I escaped though. I broke the thumb of my left hand and pulled it out of the shackle while he was at work. Still doesn't work quite right. I still have back spasms and a fear of showering with others all these years later. What the frick? I'm glad you made it out. I'm so sorry. I had a roommate's girlfriend try to kill me once. She came into my room one night while I was very drunk and very depressed and tried to convince me I wanted to kill myself. When that didn't work, she pinned me down, put a box cutter in my hand, wrapped her hand around mine, and dragged it down my arm. She did the same with my other arm, then ran out into the living room screaming that I'd tried to kill myself. Lost all my friends that night. They thought I was selfish for trying to kill myself. That night probably ended up saving my life, as it was the first step in learning to get rid of toxic people. Dude, that's insane. She tried to make you commit suicide and her acts only made you not do so. Go you. Hope you're feeling a lot better. People who have survived an attempted murder. What is your story? Had a girl cut my brake lines on my car. Didn't know until we checked the camera from the apartment complex. Luckily she cut straight through them versus slitting them. When I attempted to crank the car, the brake pedal went straight to the floor and I immediately knew something was wrong. Random dude shot me in the chest because he thought I was my drug dealer neighbor. My neighbor was 6'3" and black. I'm 5'11" and white. Joke's on him. All he got were a few cigarettes, some pocket change, and 35 years on an attempted second-degree homicide conviction. Not me, but my mother. Context: we were already independent. She lived alone with 2 dogs, and burglar break into in her house. He tried to torture her with small cuts with a knife he had. When she screamed, the dogs, 2 beautiful 80 kg/160 lb Rottweilers, defended her. The delinquent was left with facial skin tearing, skull sinking, multiple fractures in one of the arms. We had to hire a specialized cleaning service to remove the smell of blood. Such good dogs. My older sister tried to stab me with a large knife in an attempt to kill me on my 16th birthday. My mother grabbed the knife off her before it got my stomach and slammed her against the fridge and yelled at me to run. Last time I saw my older sister, she said, "I've gotten over it and you should too. It's pathetic to hang on to it." She then told people it was self-defense because I tried to hurt her. I was literally eating my birthday breakfast. I didn't sleep properly for 2 years while she was in the house because she constantly tried to break into my room at night to slit my throat while I slept. I hate her. I feel like I am very late to the party, but my uncle was attempted murdered by random and pure bad luck. He was living in a high rise and some crackhead pressed every single buzzer. Someone let him in out of laziness, not caring, wanting the buzzer to stop. The crackhead proceeded to knock on every single door down the hallways and my uncle is the first to answer the door. The crackhead pulls out a pair of scissors and plunges them into his throat. The crackhead then nonchalantly walks out of the building and says to a passing couple, "You should probably call the police because I just murdered someone." He was picked up very quickly, and my uncle survived for a year or 2 before his epilepsy killed him. In addition, it was a very small world, as my uncle went to school with this crackhead 30 years earlier, and knew his name to identify him. Not that there needed any more evidence in the case. I'm so sorry to hear about your uncle. As an epileptic, I didn't know you could die from it, so that's terrifying. I delivered a pizza to a house just outside of the city. On the way back, I stopped to help a car that pulled over in front of me with their hazard lights on. I pulled up beside them and thought it was weird that nobody rolled down a window or made any kind of contact with me for around 15 seconds. The passenger then jumped out of his side of the car yelling that they needed help as he made his way toward my car. I thought something was weird about this. As I started to pull away before he could get to my passenger door, he began shooting at me. I ducked my head after the first shot entered through the back window and embedded in my passenger seat headrest. Another shot entered through the rear window, while the other 3 only hit the outside metal parts of my car. He missed altogether with another shot. I remember being sure I was about to die as he fired more shots at me. I was very surprised that it wasn't panicky. It was just like, oh, I guess this is it. Turns out it was a plot to rob me. The pizza was ordered and the guys were stationed down the road to intercept me. They knew who I was and they knew that I would be able to recognize them, as I had delivered a few orders to them before. The guy wasn't wearing anything to cover his identity, which leads me to believe that he would have shot and killed me if he would have made it inside my car. By the next morning they had all been arrested. The shooter was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. He later appealed that sentencing because there was a word wrong in the jury instructions. He won the appeal and ended up being sentenced to 10 years, and was released November of 2010 after 5 years. The remaining 5 years were to be served as parole probation. He was arrested twice for parole probation violation when he was only a couple months away from total freedom. I laughed. TLDR. Some people tried to murder me for pizza money. They shot. They missed. They got caught. They did time, but not enough. Then did more. I saw 2 people stab someone to death in what I assume was a drug deal gone wrong. When I was on a night walk, spent another hour being chased and hiding in a backyard so they wouldn't do the same to me. Scary night. My parents moved to Mozambique during the mid-90s. I was around 8 at the time and started going to school there. A nice private one. Can't complain. My father was working for the Red Cross in Chimoio, so we had a comfortable life. One day, before arriving to school with a friend of mine, some sketchy guy stopped us, offered a whole bunch of money to just take some small box to a white van that was parked at the end of the street, not even 100 meters away. My lucky day, I guessed. It actually was, but for different reasons. When I was going to go grab the box, my friend grabbed me by the shirt, pushed me, and started running, screaming something I didn't understand in Shona, the local dialect. That moment was when it clicked. The moment I looked back, the guy had already vanished. So, wherever you are, thank you, Jude. I will never forget you. My mom attempted to murder me and my sister when we were younger. She was going through a psychotic episode and pretty suicidal, and I said the wrong thing that set her off. She chased us down to the basement with a knife. We ran into my room and my sister hid in the closet while I tried to fight my mom off at the door. She was trying to push it open while I was trying to push it closed. It was a back and forth struggle until she put her hand in the door. I think she was trying to engage my non-violence because she thought I wouldn't shut the door on her hand. But I slammed the door over and over again until her fingers broke. Meanwhile, my dad, who was in the house, finally came downstairs to check in what was happening. Mind you, this all happened very fast and my dad has a habit of zoning out when my mom gets in her episodes. He ended up pulling her off of the door and my sister and I ran out of the house and jumped in our van. He drove around the corner and turned off the lights and we all ducked down in our seats to hide and stayed there until my dad saw her drive our other car off. Frequently asked questions. 1. Why didn't you, your dad, your sister call the police? I was at the time busy with a door. My dad was at the time being negligent. My sister was at the time in a state of panic. My dad should have called the police. He didn't. 2. How old were you and your sister? I was 12. She was 13. 3. What happened afterward? My mom tried to kill herself at our cabin and was hospitalized. She and my father tried to work things out. They didn't, and it ended when I was 18 with a divorce. 4. Do you still talk to your family? Some of them. I talk to all of my siblings and am very close to the sister who was with me at the event. She and I very rarely discuss this though. 5. Where are you now mentally? I am doing much better and live half a country away. I still have PTSD from the events as well as the other abuse from my mom, other events in my life. 6. Why didn't you do A, B, or C? If I was in your situation I would have done A, B, or C. Because I didn't. I did my best at the time how I could. I survived, so I guess I did okay. 7. This sounds like Haunting of Hill House, Binding of Isaac. It's not though. I would have saved a lot of money in therapy if it were fictional. Please tell me this had consequences for your mother. When I was a kid, probably around 2nd grade, our house got robbed and my mom and I came home while it was in progress. For whatever reason, she decided to go in and interrupt them. She grabbed her gun, didn't shoot, yelled at them to get the frick out of my house, and then we drove off in a hurry to the corner store to call the cops. This was before cell phones. Less than 2 weeks later, my mom and I are sitting in the living room on the couch, our backs to the front door. Someone drives by and fires about 6 or 8 shots into the front of our house. Thank God for a steel front door. The cops came and said they didn't think the 2 incidents were related. I was 13. My mother was screaming. Legit screaming. Not the yelling that a lot of people call screaming. They're different. Trust me. At me because I made a tuna sandwich for lunch and didn't make one for her. She was a courier and I never knew when she would be home and when she wouldn't. These were the days before everyone had a cell phone. And she frequently bought lunch on the road. I was done with lunch before she got home. But she still flipped. I was selfish. A horrible daughter. Etc. Anyway, as she was screaming, I was backing away from her until I was pressed against the sink cabinet. She kept coming towards me. I swear to God before I knew what was happening or could process register, she had the scissors out of the knife block in her hand and she was still coming towards me. Scissor points directed at me. I screamed bloody murder. My brother came rushing out of his room, right off the kitchen, as she started swinging them down at my throat. He caught her hand maybe 2 inches away from my skin, and she was coming at me with enough force that there was still some forward momentum for him to counter. If he had not been there, they would have been buried in my throat. To this day, she doesn't understand why I have nothing to do with her and the closest thing I've ever received to an apology was "I'm sorry you're not over that." Yeah, she's since been diagnosed as a narcissistic sociopath. Imagine my utter lack of surprise. RA said, but narcissist is a great place to vent. Neighbor stabbed me in the chest because I hit him over the head twice with a 10-pound weight to try to stop him stabbing his wife. However, I'm fat and the knife didn't go deep enough through my breast tissue to do any damages. Yay for being fat. He's still up for attempted murder though. I had seizures when I was younger, so the fact that I remember this is amazing to me. My dad was driving my sisters and I to the new home he and my mother had just purchased like a few weeks before, when a woman who had wanted to commit suicide drove head on in my dad's lane. I remember him switching to the opposite lane a few times and each time the woman would switch as well, still driving straight for our car. We didn't get hit and cops were called and explained that the woman was trying to kill herself. I don't know what happened to the woman, but I mean I lived. My family and I didn't have any injuries, but we were pretty shaken up. Suicide is bad, but that's a very crappy way to commit suicide. If you want to die, it doesn't mean someone else also has to die. When I was 6 years old, I saw my bio dad stab my bio mom 20 times in front of my little brother and I. He took my bio mom's blood and rubs it on my brother's face and said, "This is your mother's blood." She almost died right in front of us. They got her to the hospital in enough time to save her life. But I was scary and I remember everything. He only went to jail for 8 years. He claimed he heard demons telling him to do it. I was walking down the street and somebody missed me in a drive-by. It was like that scene in The Apartment in Pulp Fiction. This happened about 10 years ago in Phoenix, AZ near 99th Ave and Lower Buckeye. I'm not someone anybody on the street would feel the need to shoot, so I assume it was a random shooting. It wasn't me but my uncle. When I was a kid, around a decade ago, my uncle got shot while coming out of a bar with a few friends. His friend got hit once in his shoulder but was fine. My uncle, on the other, got hit 3 times, once in the colon, lung, and heart. By all rights the shooter had gotten him and drove away. His friends rushed him to the hospital and, with the bullet lodged in his heart and blood entering his lung, he managed to survive. He was in a lot of pain for a long time, but since then he's gotten his life together and is getting married in about a year. I appreciate all the shot through the heart puns, LMAO. Keep 'em coming if you have more. Bullet to the heart and he survived. That's crazy. I worked in a jail and a guy from a 1%er biker gang tried to pay $10,000 to have me killed because he somehow got the idea that I was the Fed who busted him and was merrily pretending to be a jailer so I could spy on him. Don't do em, kids. The guy was bragging about it and one of the other inmates who I had saved from a heart attack with first aid didn't like that, so he beat the living crap out of the guy and then told me about it. Phone call recordings confirmed that he had promised the money to 2 guys if they shot me in the back of the head while escorting him to court and busted him out. Federal marshals rolled them up and on his way to court I whispered to him, "Your friends won't be joining us." When we got to the planned ambush point, instead of a bond hearing he got charged for trying to have me murdered and organizing an escape. Not my story, but grandmother's friend was getting picked up from work by her husband when he shot at her 5 times. He missed 4 times and the 5th bullet hit the underwire of her bra. He then turned the gun around and killed himself. He had just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She's alive and was completely uninjured. She now jokes about how bad of a shot he was to miss that many times. Crazy but story. Underwire doesn't just save boobs, it saves lives. Ex-girlfriend with mental health problems plotted to kill herself, her entire family and me. Starting with me, she ran at me with a screwdriver and I knocked her the frick out. Glad she started with me and not her little sister. Not my story, but a girl I went to high school with. She had a flat tire driving home from work one night during college and was pulled over in the side of the road. A car pulls up and she thinks someone is getting out to help. A dude just freaking rushes her, slits her throat and stabs her a few times, then gets back in his car and speeds off. She managed to make it to a nearby house and survived, but they never caught the guy. Freaking terrifying. A little bit of background. Here we use Telegram to buy drugs. We have this big group with lots of dealers. Very sorted. Very handy. So I just got home from college and parked my car on the street. It was about 2300 hours and I was just sitting and browsing my phone. At some point I got into Telegram to read some work related messages when suddenly a guy opens the passenger door and tries to get in. I'm trying to push him out and he's like, "Shh, you better not," and points to the driver's window where another guy was standing pointing a gun at me. He gets into the car and from the back another guy comes in, so now there's 3 of them. One on the passenger seat, one by the driver's window which by now opened the door and putting the gun to my head, and another who was sitting in the back and was pointing a knife to my neck. At first I got really confused and I was like, what the frick, guys? The guy next to me started talking about money I owe them and started searching my car. I told them they're mistaken and he was like, "I saw you browsing Telegram, so don't crap me." At that point from some reason I got really calm, as I do not do drugs and I don't owe nobody money. I tried to explain that I was just reading work messages, but the guy with the gun got really mad and hit me with the gun. He tried to pull me out and the dude next to me stopped him and said there's an easy way to check, so he took my phone and started going through everything. At some point he got into my messages with my mom, my little sister. He was checking where do I work. He got into the gallery and found pictures of my dog, and that's when I worried the most. He said to his friends, "Look how cute his dog is. Ain't it? You love your dog, do you?" And I didn't reply. Few minutes later and he finds nothing. Then he explains me that they supplied some guy 4k worth of weed and he never paid. Next he says sorry and they're off. TLDR. I was sitting in my car when 3 armed men jumped in thinking I owe them drug money. I wasn't. Outside of the pistol whipping that went as nicely as it possibly could have, I think. I have told this story before. Hopefully some people will read this. I woke up one Monday at around 5 AM hearing things falling. I lived in an apartment building in the 2nd floor and I thought that someone had fallen down the stairs. I heard "help please" and reluctantly stood up to see what was up. There was no one in the stairs, but in one apartment the lights were on and the door was open. I went inside and I saw my neighbor on the floor, and a guy on top of him, with a knife trying to stab him, and my neighbor holding this guy's wrist to stop him. "Help me." He came through the window. I just stood there, waiting to see what was really happening, because I literally couldn't believe my eyes, until it hit me that this was real. This was happening. My first thought was to call the police, but then I realized that they would never get there on time. I had to take the knife, so I went there and I reached down to the floor, like one does to pick up a coin, trying to grab the knife, and then he hit me. I fell to the floor, and we continued to struggle there. I have no idea how long that lasted. Could have been 10 seconds, or 10 hours. It felt that all my life I had been trying to get that knife, that I had spent years doing that, and nothing else remotely mattered. I don't remember much of the fight. I remember having his shoes on my face. I remember seeing his shoulder. I remember seeing his face. I remember him trying to stab us. But I have no idea in what order anything happened. I just know that at some point, somehow, I did got the knife. I stood up, and the guy turned towards me to take the knife again, but he had his back to my neighbor, and he was able to knock him down and pin him on the floor. Then I called the police, and the rest is bureaucracy. My dad was choking me and I had started to feel myself fade when my mom had finally come home and opened the door right on time. ETA. Wow, did this blow up way more than I expected. No, it's not a Simpsons reference. My dad was very abusive and my mom tried to shield us kids from it. She didn't leave him for another 8 years though, but he never got that close to killing me again, either. He killed himself a few years ago after a long 33 days with me trying to save him from his own demons. It was a long, manipulated and very calculated experience on his part. We're doing a lot better now and I appreciate the kind words. OMG, that's horrible. In so many ways. I hope you are okay. My sister's adopted brother, it's complicated, had his throat slit by a hitchhiker and was kicked out of the car and left for dead on a country road. Luckily no arteries we hit. He tied his t-shirt around his throat and managed to crawl to a farmhouse to get help and survived. They caught the guy and he went to jail. New scar and a husky voice was the outcome. Welp, not picking up hitchhikers for sure now. We were arguing and he started to grab me by the arms and throw me against the wall and to the ground. After maybe the 7th or 8th time of him throwing me, he carried me by my arms to my room and threw me onto the bed. Then, he pinned me down and started choking me. I had tried to get away before it happened, but he grabbed my face and shoved me down. I started to see flashes of black and white. I don't remember how, but I managed to get my feet under him and onto his chest and was able to push him off me. He was my boyfriend at the time. I couldn't believe someone who claimed to love me could do something like that. Now every time I feel even the slightest bit of not being able to breathe I picture his face. And to make matters worse, he stalked me for like 8 months after I broke up him. He also told me if he would have gone through it, he would have burned my house down me in it. For anyone asking what happened that led up to this, I found out he was talking to another girl, so I confronted him and told him to go BW her if that's what he wanted. This made him mad. BC I wouldn't fight for him. He started shouting and claiming that I didn't love him. When I pointed out that he was the one who couldn't have possibly loved me, BC he was talking about a future this other girl. He got mad and that's when he started tossing me around. That guy's gonna frickin' kill someone one day. It really wasn't an attempted murder, more like an attempt at attempted murder. I have an autistic brother who I was closer to when we were younger. I went upstairs to his room to use his computer, because our other brother broke mine. He quietly left, and I didn't think anything of it. He returned shortly after, and when he opened the door my grandma stopped him and dragged him down the stairs. Turns out, for a long time my brother had voices telling him to kill me. He didn't want to but was so tired of hearing the voices and he was just going to kill me to get the voices to stop. My grandmother had worked with mentally ill patients before, so when he went downstairs to get the pair of scissors she saw the look in his eye and knew what would happen. He was sent to some fancy hospital for the mentally ill kids in Chicago. He hated it there. I forgave him and all that, but we've never been really close after that, obviously. My brother was diagnosed as schizophrenic after this event. Autism does not cause you to hear voices in your head. I'm both happy and sad that you know what this is like. Please know this isn't a normal occurrence for mental illness. This was the only incident he ever had, and he really is a sweetheart. Mental illness does crazy things to your head. If you need help, please reach out for help. Your grandma is a freaking badass. What is a survival myth that is completely wrong and could get you killed? When anonymous people on the internet proclaim to debunk commonplace survival strategies, always confirm or refute with multiple independent second-hand sources. As an army medic I can second this. Reddit and wilderness first aid makes me irrationally angry. I've heard people say that you have to shave your hair off after you've been exposed to radiation, probably because they think radioactive dust will cling to your hair and make you sick. The problem is that shaving can create small cuts and abrasions, and you don't want that when you're covered in fallout. Just use shampoo, but not conditioner, and don't shave anything. If someone's having a seizure, do not put crap in their mouth. They're not gonna bite their tongue off, and now they are gonna choke to death. I mostly blame Black Hawk Down from propagating this misinformation. This one isn't very widely accepted, but it's in movies frequently. If you're stranded in a desert, moving during the day is alright. This will kill you. The risk of almost everything is higher during the day. Sunburn, dehydration, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, damage to your eyes, Seeing mirages that led on goose chases for a puddle of water. I believe mirages rarely, if ever, manifest the way they do in movies. Usually they're just a shimmer in the distance resembling the reflection of the sun off water. Traveling at night lowers or removes all of these risks, but does add a risk of disorientation and predators. But those are chance things, whereas heat stroke is a sure thing if you travel during the day without enough water. Deserts also tend to get very cold in the nighttime though. And yeah, mirages are caused by the same crap as when you're driving on a long straight road and it see what looks like puddles way in the distance. Alcohol makes you feel warmer, but if you drink your veins become wider. This is why you feel warmer, but also this is why you will freeze faster. If you drink enough alcohol while freezing to death, you'll at least feel alright for the rest of your life. Apparently some people think the best way to survive a wolf attack is to bend down and show the wolf you're submissive towards him and pose as no threat. If you do this, you're dead. The wolf will 100% kill you. Your best bet is to walk away without turning your backs on them, maintaining eye contact the whole way. If you look away or turn your back, the wolf's killer instinct will kick in and it'll kill you. Don't make a lot of noise and aggressive movements towards a wolf the same way you do to a black bear, because most likely it'll be seen as a challenge, not a threat. That if an animal eats a plant, it must be safe for humans to eat. Number. If you eat a berry or a mushroom just because a deer did, you'll probably die. People who say this clearly don't know what koalas eat. Not related to the outdoors, but survival nonetheless. If someone is threatening to kidnap you, do not go with them. If you follow them, you're gone almost for certain. Scream for help, run, fight back if you can. Cooperation will only land you in a worse situation. Nah, sister, you're not getting me to no secondary location. Luckily this is not a common survival myth, but it is so insane I think it's worth mentioning here. On one of Bear Grylls' idiot shows, he's trying to hike overland toward where he knows a town is. The terrain is extremely rough and it's time consuming to detour around several impassable obstacles. He shows the viewer how to shave several miles off this journey by using a flooded cave as a shortcut. He literally goes cave diving, one of the most dangerous things in the world you can do, regardless of the circumstances, without any equipment, and portrays it as a helpful survival tip. A while back some kids drowned face diving. The pocket they came up for air in was a concentration of other gases, so even though they got out of the water they couldn't breathe. Do not ration your water too much. Your body needs at least 1.5 liter in normal circumstances. When you have enough food, are not cold or hot, etc. There is no reason to drink less than this if you are lost, other than to die from dehydration. They actually found people who died of dehydration with effing water in their bottles. Just heard a saying for the first time recently: ration sweat not water. So sit your pretty butt down in the shade during the day and sip your water, within reason, and wait to be rescued. Hopefully people are looking for you because you told them where you would be. If someone has been bitten by a venomous animal or insect, do not suck out the venom. It'll just make both people sick. Do not trust what you've seen on the movies. Suck their dong instead to calm them down. Then take them to the nearest hospital. I don't care what that idiot Bear Grylls says. Don't drink your urine if you're dehydrated. Seriously, it's true that there will be water in your urine, but you know what's even more prominent? Urea. It's a toxin. A waste that's leaving your body for a reason. Plus, if you're so dehydrated that you can actually muster up the courage to drink your own pee, there really isn't gonna be that much water to drink anyway. I mean, come on. You're dehydrated. You really think your body is gonna produce water out of thin air? Bear Grylls was referring to his urine. You can order a bottle of it in a variety of flavors. Don't stand in doorways during earthquakes. It really won't help you. It's better to hide under a desk, table, bed, or any other piece of furniture that can protect you from falling debris. Drop, cover, hold on. You are most likely to be hurt by large heavy objects, and building codes in developed countries mean that the building itself is likely to withstand an earthquake. Protect yourself from shelves, breaking glass, falling light fixtures, and tall furniture. Cutting open a snake bite and sucking out the venom. The venom travels way too fast for that to make any difference, and the cut itself can become infected. No need for a tourniquet either. You don't want the venom concentrating in one area. Find a fence or some kind of man-made object and follow it. No, stay freaking still. It's way easier for the search party to find you. That depends on whether or not you anticipate that someone will be searching for you. If you are solo through hiking something and you don't have regular check-ins, which isn't smart, it could be weeks before you are overdue, assuming you ever are. Since lightning never strikes twice in the same place, it's safe to stand in a spot during a storm where you know lightning has hit before. Plays lotto, loses, cries in the rain, gets thundershocked twice. If you're getting kidnapped, do not go to the second location. I repeat, do not go to the second location. 95% of people who go to the second location never return. Do whatever it takes, even kill your kidnapper if you can. Run, scream, make yourself the most violent animal on earth. Aim for the eyes and poke as hard as you can. Choke them, bite them, kick the groin with all you have. Just do not go to the second location. Cooperation will kill you. Make yourself the most violent animal on earth. Transforms into a hippopotamus. Saw this on Reddit, so I don't know if it's totally wrong. Follow the river downstream when you're lost and you will find civilization at some point. Yeah, but that point might be 100s of miles away. Every downstream path might not lead to civilization. Most of the time it's better to stay in the place you're in, assuming you told someone where you were going before you left. Assess the situation and try to follow other alternatives before walking downstream. You might get lost with no way to lead people to you. I've seen people mistaken aspirin and nitroglycerine when discussing what to do when someone is experiencing chest pain on AskReddit threads. There have been comments saying to chew aspirin and keep it in the mouth for absorption. For the record, you chew and swallow aspirin. It is nitroglycerine that needs to be held under the tongue to take effect. Any fast-moving water is safe to drink. That's a big no-no. It's safer than slow-moving or standing water, but unless it's from a clear spring, this allows the ground to filter the water, or you have very recently covered the entire length of the river upstream from you, there can still be contaminants that are really bad. For example, a dead animal within 15 meters, I believe, not 100%. Anyone who knows for sure, please reply. The water can contaminate the water with its decomposing bits and juices. I don't know if this is even a survival myth or just something I feel like saying because it is relevant and I could see it being an instinctual reaction. But if someone tries to kidnap and get you into a car at gunpoint or knife point, do not let them. Do whatever you gotta do to get away and fight like heck. If they have to shoot you or stab you right there, then so be it. It is much better than whatever the heck they will do to you once they get you in the car and in isolation, which will likely end in you being shot or stabbed anyways and somewhere that nobody will be able to help you. I got a copy of the worst case scenario board game as a gift. The correct answer to one of the questions about skydiving asserted that you wouldn't have to breathe mid-fall because at terminal velocity, the skin absorbs enough oxygen to survive. Obviously this is false, and it's apparently a myth that skydiving instructors tell students as a joke. I threw the game away before I accidentally memorized any other misinformation that wasn't as easy to spot. All I know is, if your parachute malfunctions, then aim for some motherfucking trees. You will 100% want to hit a load of branches rather than come down on the ground or water. Not sure if it's total bulls, but the whole fetal position thing if you encounter a bear, it just seems like a good way to serve a bear its lunch. Brown bears will attack if they feel threatened, so if you show you are not a threat, lying down, they will leave you alone. Black bears, however, will attack if they are looking for food, so you should display crazy dominance so they leave you alone and seek food elsewhere. You can drink seawater by mixing some normal water. Many people have tried this, but even mixing it in a small ratio can make us seriously ill. I taught martial arts for years. Many people used to ask me, what would you do if someone held a gun to you when we would do gun knife training seminars, expecting some kind of answer like, use Krav Maga to get the gun from them and snap their neck with a karate chop. The real answer? You get away, or you get shot, stabbed and die. Ask anyone who is good at martial arts and isn't trying to upsell you and your family on some ricksquando. The best things taught to people in classes on how to survive these situations involve not being there in the first place. Avoid the dark alleys, rough bar scenes, parking far away from the building when you have a closing shift, or have someone with you, making sure you are loud, and obviously the victim uncomfortable. The best way to defend yourself is to have a gun on you and be trained to use it properly. There is no magic trick anyone can teach you to get out of a sticky situation, and martial arts should be used as a last resort. Make sure they are looking at your face. It's much harder to kill someone if you have to look them in the eyes, unless you are a complete psychopath. I'll just go live off the land. It's not the 18th century anymore. There aren't vast untamed tracts of wilderness teeming with wild game. Even in rural areas, the game population densities are nowhere close to what they used to be when people used to actually live like that. It was only possible because there were 2 or 3 dozen animals to eat per person in any given region. Even then, people starved. The Lewis and Clark expedition comes to mind. There's weeks-long periods in their journals where nobody can find enough to eat. Additionally, there is rabid starvation, also known as Venetian poisoning or deer poisoning. Wild game is extremely high in protein, but almost totally lacking in fat or carbs. Without these, your body can't break down all the protein and it starts to accumulate in your blood, eventually shutting down your kidneys and liver. Upvote, yet laughs in Alaskan. Drinking your own urine. That's just bad. And you're drinking your body's waste. You can drink it, but it'll make you more thirsty. How to actually deal with bear attacks. Black bear. In 99.999% of black bear interactions with humans, a loud noise will scare the black bear away. They only ever attack humans if they feel there's no other way to escape or protect their cub. If that happens, back away slowly and maintain eye contact. Talk to it to make sure it knows you're there. Brown bear. These guys will ruin you if they're hungry or protecting a cub. If you're being charged by a brown bear, you'd better pray that you have multiple firearms being pointed and discharged at it, or are very close to your car. Polar bear. It's just a brown bear that's always hungry. Good luck. If you're not Australian, you tend to believe the best way to deal with venomous snake bites is to suck the poison out, cut the wound to get the poison out, and keep the person moving to keep them awake. This is all very, very wrong. First, immobilize the person whole limb. Second, wrap from the bite site all the way up and down the limb fairly tightly. Third, keep the bitten person as still as possible and get help. Don't quietly go with someone if they threaten to hurt you. If you don't, I was always taught, if anyone grabs you and says don't scream or I'll shoot stab you, scream anyways, because getting shot stabbed is better than whatever they have planned for you. In a nuclear war, get into a cellar or central part of a building. Actually, you'll probably survive in the strong room space you're in, but the rest of the building will collapse on top of you. Best survival tip is to dig a trench outside, ideally closer to the nearest likely target than the building you'll be in, so the building collapses away from you, not into your trench. The reason being, an overpressure from most nukes will easily topple a building, but if you've even in a shallow trench, you'll be fine. Soldiers did this in nuclear tests all the time. Teaching kids stranger danger with no exceptions mean they will hide from search parties and never ask for help. Teach them what situations are dangerous and who is the best to ask for help. Never teach them every stranger is dangerous. Here's a few. You can't suck venom out of a wound, it will only give you an infection. A little venom in your mouth. Must does not always grow on the north side of trees. It grows on the side with moderate to low sunlight. If a mama bear is with her cubs, do not try and scare her. If you appear as a threat, not even a gun will stop her. Just try to look big and walk away casually. Punching a shark in the gills is harder than it looks. It's hard to land a solid punch underwater. You will not outclimb a bear or a big cat up a tree. Heck, some of them can sprint up a T1. I share this every time this is reposted. Do not use your headdress like a hammer to break open a car window. If you need to break open a window to escape a car, jam the metal of the headrest into the door where the window recedes into it, and pull the headrest towards you. It's almost impossible to break a car window with an object like a headrest from a sitting position. It's really easy to pry it and shatter it from the lever action doing it this way. What happened to the surviving employees that were in the WTC buildings? Local 3 NYC electrician here. I became a basket case for over 2 years. Eventually put down the bottle and found employment away from NYC. Still can't watch documentaries about it. Don't like to talk about it. Lost more than my mind that day. Documentaries are a trigger for flashbacks for me too. That smell. Be well. My grandparents' neighbors were a nice couple. They were in their 40s with 2 kids. Our town is about 2 hours away from NYC and the father would travel into work every day whereas the mother taught across the street at the middle school. I was in her class when we found out about the attacks. She immediately fell to the ground and went pale. We were all frightened, not knowing what to do or say. Most of us knew he worked in the towers. Small town. One of the kids in my class ran to the phone to call the principal. Before he even got off the phone, her husband came bursting into the room with his pajamas on yelling, "I didn't go in. I didn't go in. I'm sick." I stayed home sick. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen up to that point. To answer your questions, I really can't because his whole department was killed, minus a few employees. He began working at the local subway. He just wanted a stress-free job, close to his family. I want to know the mindset of someone that worked in the towers but stayed home sick or was running late. I couldn't even imagine what they were thinking. My uncle was a survivor from the second tower that got hit. Did the survivors lose their jobs? Because so many people from his office died. He was on the 80th story or so, but left the building when the first one was hit. The company that he worked for closed their NY branch, so some people did lose their jobs. Were they transferred to a different office? He was transferred to their London office. Did they take long, unpaid vacations? His wife was really traumatized by the event. They had an apartment with a view of the NY skyline, so she watched the entire thing go down. She was panicking, seeing her husband's office demolished, and couldn't get a hold of him. And he was unable to get home because everything was closed down. For about 24 hours, she thought he was dead. So, to recuperate, they did take some time off and just traveled for a bit. Hats off to your uncle. My dad was in the first building, 71st floor. He works for the Port Authority, which recently opened an office in Jersey City. Before that opened, he was working at Newark Airport. I guess they have offices there as well. He went back to work the day after 9/11. My mom was freaking out telling him to stay home, and he said tomorrow is a Wednesday, and I go to work on Wednesdays. I don't even think he knew at that point where he was going to go to work, but he just figured it out. It may have been a coping mechanism. I went to work the day after a tsunami wiped out my office. It was an attempt to keep things normal, in whatever small way possible. Work was not at all normal, but being there and sorting through debris made me feel like I was helping. And when everything is all gone to heck like that, helping a little feels good. At the time, I worked for a law firm that had just rented offices in Tower 2. They'd been there for less than a month or so. I think about 20-25 people worked in that branch. 5 people were killed on 9/11. The firm ended up setting up a new office space. I don't know what they offered to employees of the branch. My 9/11 story. Each branch kept copies of resumes for all the attorneys and the entire firm, no matter where they were based. A few months after, one of my bosses got a call that a pristine copy of his resume was found in the rubble. Each branch kept copies of resumes for all the attorneys and the entire firm, no matter where they were based. Yeah, resumes were all over the streets. You looked at them and wondered if the person got the job or was lucky enough to miss out. Kind of ghoulish to call and find out. I used to work for somebody that ran an investment firm in the building. He was out of town on business when the planes hit, but the 2 other founding members died along with 95% of staff. He was planning to retire, but instead rebuilt the firm. One of the coolest guys I know in so many ways. A close friend of mine worked in the North Tower. She was sick that morning and stayed home. She witnessed the second plane fly into the building. A few months later she moved to Texas and became a raging alcoholic. She refused any help or advice and continued her downward spiral. She lost a high-paying job, was jailed twice, DUI, and ended up working the lunch shift in a strip club. Whoa, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope things get better for her. My dad worked for a co-located telco that had an office and lines running through the WTC. He was at another site a few blocks down, and he basically just started walking away when he saw the first plane hit. When the towers came down, there wasn't anything he could do. Nobody could call out because all the major telephone lines were trunk through the WTC, and when they went down, those links were destroyed. He worked through the next few days trying to bring up telecommunication service. His company was losing millions by the minute. Eventually he lost his job and was unemployed ever since. To my knowledge, a few friends were survivors. Lose job if their company kept a NY office. They had some time off as the office was being set up, and to get over the trauma, then returned to work in a new location. This was the experience of my friends. Government assistance no, because they were not unemployed at any point in time. The company paid them even during the time they were off working from home. Long unpaid vacation? No, the company did not have a NY office for a while, a couple of weeks, so they had time off, paid, while they waited. They did some work from home during this time, but they were anxious to get back to work. It seemed to me they just wanted to start to create a new normal. You did not ask, but I would say the greatest impact on survivors was the stress of going to funerals and memorial services, sometimes 3 or 4 in one day. There was the survivor's guilt, the stress of seeing the loved ones of their lost colleagues, and the constant focus on what they had experienced. They wanted to move on, but the whole world conspired to make them stay in that moment for far too long, in my opinion, based on conversations with them. My friend worked across the street. When the first plane hit, his boss told everyone to get back to work. He left and ended up saving someone's life when the tower collapsed. The person was in shock and standing in the middle of the street, staring at the building. He pulled the person out of the street into a nearby vestibule. He did not receive government assistance, and for a while would vomit every time a plane flew overhead. He lost his job, and was working at a restaurant in Times Square for about 6 months afterwards. He ended up moving back to his hometown and eventually went back to school. Almost all of the deaths were people on the floors on and above the plane hits. On the floors below the plane hits, almost everyone got out successfully, so a lot of companies in the WTC had almost everyone working there survive. I worked in the Boston office of a company that had its NY offices on the lower floors of one of the towers. The only fatality we had was a man who refused to leave. He'd been there for the prior WTC bombing, and figured he'd probably be fine. My father was in the North Tower when the first plane hit. He and 2 co-workers managed to save a few people on their floor and even offered to carry a guy in a wheelchair down the stairs, who politely declined. We found out later he died. My dad made it out safely and was on the ferry to NJ when the towers collapsed. But to answer your questions, he went to work the next day at another office in NJ. He mainly went in to make sure everyone made it home safe. His company eventually went bankrupt a couple years later because they insured some stuff that was related to the attacks and the claims depleted their reserves. He did take some time off afterwards and from that day never missed a single one of my or my siblings' games. No government assistance, but the company did give him and the other 2 co-workers who scanned the floor before leaving a nice little check. One of my former assistants, who went on to NYC to start her career, wasn't in the towers, but got to work late that day because of a subway switching problem. As she exited her stop, she saw a rain of papers coming down, and police were already there telling everyone to go back, get out, nothing to see. She saw the first tower building on fire, and didn't know what happened. So she went back home. When she got home, I think she lived in Flushing at the time, only then did she hear about what happened. Her office was hit on the first strike, and I think 28 out of 31 employees at her company were most likely killed instantly. The other 2 were also affected by the subway switch issues, and were late to work. She was pretty shaken up by it, not only the near miss due to being later, but survivor's remorse. She doesn't talk about it much, but she lives a normal life, got married a few years later, has kids. My uncle is an IT guy. He worked around the 80th floor of the South Tower in the 80s and 90s. After the 93 truck bombing attempt on the WTC, he grew scared of working so high up and decided to work in Building 9 of the WTC, which was the third building that collapsed on 9/11. A few weeks after 9/11, he transferred to a different company, a company on the 8th floor of a shorter building in Lower Manhattan. Now he works in a 4-story building in Greenwich Village. He's terrified of heights and terrified of planes, even though he used to be in the Air Force and still travels abroad often. Then my brother had a business trip in NYC on 9/11 and was crossing Washington Bridge around the time that the planes hit. Perhaps not as much as my uncle, but he was really traumatized. Everyone was. But everyone has to get back to work sometime, whether it's the next week or the next month. My uncle never talks about 9/11, though, and he refers to it as the World Financial Center, but never World Trade Center. My cousin worked on the 80-ish floor of the second tower to be hit. He commuted from New Jersey each day and on the 11th of September was running behind. He got out of the subway as the first tower was hit. The reason he was running late that day was his wife was starting her new job as a flight attendant. Another strange coincidence was my auntie visited them the year prior and he had given them a tour of the WTC. This was on the 11th of September, 2000. His office was relocated, although they lost quite a few employees. Him and his wife, she quit her job the day it happened. Took some time to deal with the emotional aspect. The worst thing for him was when he finally got out of New York and to where him and a lot of people who worked at the towers parked was seeing all the abandoned cars and then seeing them days later knowing that those people weren't coming back for them. The worst thing for him was when he finally got out of New York and to where him and a lot of people who worked at the towers parked was seeing all the abandoned cars and then seeing them days later knowing that those people weren't coming back for them. Dang. In all these years I never even considered that. Whoa. My neighbor worked in the towers and killed himself shortly after the attack. I was pretty young, but my mom said it might be because he lost his job. I couldn't imagine the trauma anyone would have to deal with after something like that happened. The heaviness of everything would appear to be too much. To answer your other questions, I did not get additional time off. With the exception of the 3 days immediately after the attack, did not receive government assistance, was temporarily relocated to Jersey, where I worked the graveyard shift. Also due to road train closures, the commute was roughly 2.5 hours each way. I lasted about a year before getting laid off and switching professions. I can speak to the workers at the Deutsche Bank building, which took significant damage. None of the survivors lost their jobs. They reported to work at one of the area disaster recovery facilities. Because of the gap between desks and workers, DB moved around a lot. For a few years, every few months meant another move until they could consolidate. I used to work at Deutsche Bank at 130 Liberty Street in M&A, and I heard that they were cutting staff before 9/11/01 and that it actually helped keep some people's jobs longer. I had already left for a job at 1WTC by then, but had still kept in touch with former co-workers, especially after I got that day off, which was a Tuesday and Wednesday off. I had to go in on Thursday to rebuild the network infrastructure in a new location in Midtown. Fortunately for us, we had an off-site data center in New Jersey which we set up for Y2K 2 years earlier. My dad used to work on the 84th floor of the South Tower. Luckily he was late for work that day because he let 3 trains go by and stayed on the local train because he had a seat and wanted to read the paper that morning. After some time his company relocated to another location in Manhattan and he kept his job. I don't know how much the death of a bunch of his co-workers directly related to this, but he ended up leaving the company he worked at fairly soon after the relocation. I had never thought of the impact of all of the people attending so many funerals for fallen co-workers. For some reason that just hit me pretty hard. I was in 7th grade when it happened. We had a girl come into our class midway through the year from NY. She attended 26 funerals in the following 3 weeks after the attacks. Being on the West Coast, we were sheltered from it. I was still asleep when it happened. My uncle wasn't employed in the WTC, but he was a member of the FDNY. He told me that the days following, Several businesses were shut down and helped rescue efforts. My uncle escaped building 2. He worked for the Port Authority of NY and NJ. He did some work at their LaGuardia office but eventually left to seek a new career. I think this is the general life of most of the survivors. Seek some new distraction and try not to remember much. My English teacher was a chef on the restaurant Windows on the World at the time they fell. He said that he lost his job but was able to find one within a month because his employer wanted to help him. My brother's friend worked at the WTC. She was downstairs doing the office coffee run because she was the new girl who started on Monday the 10th. If I recall correctly, her office was on one of the floors that got hit. Story time. I worked for Deutsche Bank on 9/11. My office was directly across the street from the WTC. I think I got 3 days off before I was asked to work from their office in Jersey City. My job was effectively eliminated, however they kept me on board for about a year before laying me off. One of my favorite memories is in the days after the attack, an overzealous manager obtained permission from the NYFD to collect computer equipment that was left behind. Long story cut short, we were ordered to immediately head to the site. Experienced a 10 hours commute only to learn that all of the equipment had been destroyed. The manager was so fuming at the end of the ordeal that he began to stomp in place, screaming obscenities. Boarders wanted to reclaim the store safe. I don't believe they were allowed in to get it, although that building was standing on its own. My aunt worked locksmith. Just missed dying in the 1993 bombing, which killed all her colleagues. In 2001 she was off that day to bring her girlfriend to the doctor. She lost her job entirely but got workers' comp as well as VF money. She's our supervisor now, and being in security at WTC got her in the door. She took a few years off, some paid. I worked in the WTC North Tower 51st floor. We had about 80 employees and we relocated to Jersey City, which is now the permanent office. When I walked home that day, the first thing on my mind was, will I have a job next week? Thankfully, we got our act together quickly and after a few days we were rebuilding everything and were fully operational within a month. Whoa, this is actually a really good and unique question. It's one of those things you never think about, but once you think about you're surprised you don't know. What's weird too is that isn't not marked serious and no one has made a joke. My mom worked for a company whose HQ was in the towers. Workers worked from home until a new location was found. The company was ahead of the times in tech and had off-site backups so they could operate within days. The WTC collapsed to drive office space prices through the roof in NYC with so many clients looking for space all at once. Now my dad didn't work in the towers, but he did see the first plane hit. He had just dropped me off at school and was on the bike path in NYC, right next to the World Financial Center when he saw the first plane hit. He immediately biked to my school, picked me up and took me home. We had family friends staying with us for about a week after. They lived about a block from the towers. Now in the aftermath of 9/11, he lost his job, which was at an ad agency in Lower Manhattan, maybe 10-15 blocks from the towers. While I know him losing his job had something to do with 9/11, I think it just had to do with the ad agency's lack of work and money following 9/11, rather than the incident itself. I vaguely remember, but times were tough and things were uncertain back then. My aunt worked at the Vista International Hotel just underneath the towers. She was able to get out before the towers collapsed. My cousin works for Morgan Stanley. I don't know which tower he worked in, but that day, he decided to take his daughter to her first day of school and go to work afterwards. As he was heading to work, the bus pulled up and the driver told him what happened. He had no idea what was going on until that moment. Today, he still works for them, but they moved the company to somewhere in Connecticut and wound up moving there because the commute was terrible. Used to live in New Jersey. Can't really say much about how it was with the WTC survivors specifically, but I know that nowadays it is standard practice for larger companies, the ones you would expect to have offices in the WTC, to have disaster recovery sites more or less close by. These sites are bare bones and out of the way, but allow employees to keep business operations afloat until the disaster blows over. The company I work for example, has an office in Manhattan and a doctor's site in Jersey. I worked in the South Tower. We were relocated to temporary space in CT and eventually ended up in Midtown for a year. The company then returned home to the World Financial Center. We did not lose any employees. No government assistance. We were all enrolled in a health registry to track physical and mental health. We actually were actively back at work 1 week after in order to show that the company was functional. Nobody really survived that day. For some, the day never ended. It just got quieter in the background of our mind, but it's always there. The last words we spoke to them, the last actions we did with them, all the time we wasted on stupidity, the all-consuming helplessness that came in the following hours. Guilt, guilt, guilt. You either gave up on God completely or welcomed him into your life. For some, the person we became that day resembles nothing of who we were at 8:45 that morning. Guilt and regret is laced between every minute that makes up the hours of our days. That day was an infection that wiped away all the days that came before it. We're immune to the future because what used to matter before that day just simply stopped mattering. Employment, promotions, education, yeah, we still live the life we're supposed to live on the outside because others are watching us. It makes them feel better to believe we're normal again. But for some, the most pressing issue in our lives is the hope that one day we'll get a call telling us that they finally found some sort of human remain of her, and we now have something to put inside the empty coffin we buried. I think I've commented on a post of yours about this before, but what you said here really sounds like it came straight out of my heart and mind. Just wanted to send love and commiseration, although I know sometimes that's the last thing that's wanted, from someone who wishes there was a way to be 12 again and have her back. My dad worked on the 64th floor. He happened to be doing an audit somewhere else that day, but his office was gone and many people he knew never made it out. He worked from a temp office for a bit, then they offered him a great early retirement package. It really ruined him in a lot of ways. He spent a decade just kind of lost and sad and purposeless. He's doing a lot better in the last few years, but I'll never forget just watching him drift as I moved into adulthood. Survivor guilt. It's a nasty thing. My father's aunt worked in Building 7. I don't know all the details because it's not something you want to ask a person about too much. She worked there in real estate, but was late to work when all heck broke loose. As far as I'm aware, none of her co-workers died. That's as far as I know about what happened, but she now lives in Los Angeles. This is just a guess, but I'm sure they just relocated their business. I'm glad to hear that all these people survived. My boyfriend's uncle godfather was a firefighter who went in the second tower. He was last seen on the 5th floor, but then was never found again. Watching the building collapse down to the ground gives me a sick feeling in my stomach, knowing he was in that 5th floor. It's like watching him die. We can only hope that it was a quick and painless. Maybe he was unconscious from the smoke. He left his 2 young children and wife behind. She remarried his friend who was also a firefighter. That was a common thing for some reason. Wives of police officers or firefighters that remarried in the same department. As I recall the story, my aunt's BFF's husband worked in them and worked the days when the bomb went off in 1993 and on 9/11. His office was right above where the 93 bomb went off, and although he didn't usually go out for lunch, he did that day, which was what saved him then. The second time, he made it out and walked to his wife's office, all covered in ash. He's retired now. He's a super sweet fellow. I'm so glad he made it. I know one lady who worked in Building 7. I think that was the last one to collapse. She worked for an insurance company and had the flu the day of the attacks. It turns out during 2001 Manhattan Island had a huge office space surplus, so that particular company had no trouble at all finding another location. One of my dad's good friends worked in the North Tower, not sure what floor. On the 9th of October 2011, he was outside and ended up talking with his neighbor, who told him that he should seriously consider not going to work the next day. He ended up staying home and immediately called the police when he saw what had happened. His neighbor's house was completely cleared out when the police got there. Bullshit. I work for a corporation who had a whole office at the WTC. I can confirm that majority of the office branch there survived, and they were compensated and given counseling and free insurance for quite some time after it happened. They eventually just moved that branch to a different part of NYC and hired new people. They also gave the survivors an opportunity to have their jobs back. I'm not sure how many of them took it. This is kind of off topic, but it relates to the companies in the WTC. After 9/11, my great aunt donated some money to one of the companies that lost a lot of its employees' workspace. She got a letter back a little while later thanking her for her donation, and if she would donate more. She was shocked. My father worked at the Guggenheim Museum at the time, and he was laid off as a result of the WTC attacks. Apparently tourism to NYC nosedived and the museum lost tons and tons of revenue. My mother-in-law served as the key custodian for the South Tower and was the only one who made it off her floor alive. Pretty traumatic experience for her. Her post served as the call center for the building, and she got many calls from those trapped above the impact area asking for help. I can't imagine what it feels like to be the last person many people ask for help. To add to that, days after the attack, many of her co-workers' relatives would call her asking if she had seen their loved ones. She knew they were all dead. Did she return to work? Nope. She eventually worked for CNN. I believe some survivors received some sort of settlement. She has pretty bad episodes when on the subway and a bad back from being thrown into a desk when UA-175 hit the South Tower. Murder attempt survivors. What happened? While transferring work locations, I was staying with a cousin of mine at the new location. Her psychotic, alcoholic, drug-addled, vicious ex-boyfriend, whom she had just kicked out of her house, was stalking her. He saw me move in, assumed I was the new boyfriend, and lay in wait for me outside her house one night, where he jumped me from behind and slit my throat. Despite losing massive amounts of blood, I didn't die. I didn't even feel that bad. So while he was trying to break into her house, presumably to kill her too, I grabbed a baseball bat from the trunk of my car and beat him until I passed out. When I woke up, I wasn't thinking all that clearly, so I went inside, cleaned myself up and drove to the hospital. My cousin wasn't even home at the time. She had gone into the city with her mother for the weekend to see a show and go shopping. My attacker and I ended up in the same ICU. I had rendered him a quadriplegic. There was a great deal of civil and criminal legal balls to deal with, but in the end I was cleared of any wrongdoing, and he was put on probation for 10 years, as he was no longer able to so much as brush his own teeth. His lawyer, provided by his wealthy family, convinced the judge that he was no longer a threat to anyone and the state would be spared the burden of providing him the round-the-clock care he needed if he wasn't sent to prison. I was left in massive debt which took me many years to pay off. I did sue him for the injuries I sustained, but despite being a trust fund baby from a wealthy family, he himself was indigent. He'd blown his trust fund on drugs, booze and gambling, and had nothing. His family provided him with everything, including his lawyer. He died about the same time his probation ended. Man really said call an ambulance, but not for me. Also sorry this ever happened and props for beating the living crap out of him. He pointed the gun at my face, pulled the trigger and it didn't fire. I could have beaten Usain Bolt in the next 10 seconds. Glad you're still around to tell the tale. I have a good friend with a similar story. He thinks the gun jammed or the safety was still on or something. He likes to say you've never seen a fat boy move so fast after that. My older sister was incredibly abusive towards my family, but especially me. I'm away now, so no worries. When I was 14, our dad and her were having a super petty argument that just exploded into her trying to kill him while he tried to defend himself without hurting her. She tried to stab him 3 times over but thankfully failed as my dad disarmed her. I could only watch this whole thing happen, completely frozen. She then turned to me and let out a horrible scream that I will always remember. She grabbed a knife off the floor and lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. She swung the knife towards my eye while screaming something along the lines of "I'm taking your eye." She kept pushing the knife towards it, but I managed to put my hands over hers and pull it off. My dad also tried to pull her off, but when she got like this, she had this insane primal strength and could barely be moved. The knife then cut underneath my eye, nearly hitting the eyeball. As usual with these events, nothing came of this and my mum and sister still gaslight me and say that I had some glandular issue and that's how I got a scar. Holy crap, your mother and sister gaslighting you make me angrier than reading the initial attempted stabbing WTFFF. When I was 7 years old, I made friends with a neighbor girl and we would frequently have play dates. She had an older brother, around 12-13, that would babysit us during these hangouts. One day my parents let me go over to their place on my own, as their house was in spitting distance of ours, but the brother was the only one home. He assured me that his sister would be home soon, so he lured me out to the backyard. For background, the house was completely fenced in and the backyard had a tree line surrounding it. He told me to wait by the swings, which I did, and all of a sudden he charged at me with a sledgehammer. I fell on my back in fear and his swing landed between my legs into the ground. I ran as fast as I could back to my house. My parents, to this day, say it was just horseplay, but I will never forget the look in his eyes after he missed his swing. I was attacked in a friend's house by an ex-husband. He slit her throat and slashed my face with a box cutter before hitting me over the head with a plate, knocking me out temporarily. He then lit the place on fire with us in it. I managed to wake up and drag her outside and a neighbor called the police ambulance. They caught him 2 days later trying to commit suicide in a Ramada Inn. We both lived through it, and now he is serving a life sentence. We both lived through it, and now he is serving a life sentence. I'm happy to hear this. Much love for you. Stay safe. It happened during my first year in uni. I lived with 3 roommates at my dorm. A few months into the first semester, one of my roommates had a mental breakdown and attempted to strangle me while I was asleep. I woke up to his hands around my throat, his knee on my chest and a deranged look on his face. I tried pushing him off me, clawed at his face etc., but to no avail. My eyes started to dim, my hands felt leaden. I was sure I was going to die. Fortunately, my other roommate wasn't asleep. He was laying under the covers browsing on his phone. The sounds from our struggle caught his attention, and after seeing what was happening, he pushed the attacker off me and knocked him to the ground. He then woke the other roommate and together they restrained the attacker on his bed and called the university police. The police arrived around 15 minutes later, and after we told them what happened, they called the actual cops. My roommate was arrested and taken to the police station. There he had another breakdown and bit one of the cops. He was transferred to a psychiatric facility after that. He was also expelled from the university. Something similar happened to one of my old uni roommates. She got moved to our room after her suitemate had a breakdown and attacked her with a hot pan. She luckily grabbed a knife and backed into her own bedroom before locking the door and calling campus police. It was an insane story, but heard it both from her and our before she moved in. I was shot in 2012 while delivering pizza. I was in air traffic controller school at the time. I ended up mostly okay, but disqualified from my career because I had trauma-induced seizures as a result. Of the 3 attackers, 1 died in a motorcycle crash before trial and the other 2 were out of prison by 2016. Very sorry to hear that. Not my story, but my cousin's. She was married to this crazy man. I won't go into detail about the ways he was awful, but he was insane. Also, before he married my cousin, he had another family who all died in a house fire. All 4 of his children and his previous wife. We all felt bad for him for suffering such a tragic loss, because we didn't know what he was like behind the scenes at home. We never suspected anything off about that, just thought it was a tragedy. Well, finally my cousin decided to leave him. She took her 2 kids and moved away. She had to leave abruptly, so she was missing a lot of important things. Social security cards, birth certificates, stuff like that. One day, after things cooled down some between her and her ex, she arranged for her to go over to their old house and gather the rest of their things. He asked that she bring the kids, because he missed them. Luckily, she decided to let them stay at their friend's house instead. She went over to the house, and he was absolutely enraged that she didn't bring the kids. He shot my cousin 4 times and then shot himself in the head. He was planning to do a murder-suicide with the whole family. That's why he wanted the kids there. My cousin was shot twice in the neck, in the face, and in the arm. Somehow, none of the bullets struck any major arteries or anything. She was able to make it next door to her neighbor's house and get help. She survived a murder-suicide attempt and her accident. That whole thing really makes me look at that house fire tragedy in a different light. Not me, but a girl I went to school with. Her deranged uncle broke into her house dressed as a FedEx driver while her parents were running errands. Mom and dad came home, tried to wrestle the gun from him before she and the husband were shot and killed. He then made all 5 kids lay on the floor as he shot them one by one. The bullet intended for my friend grazed her hand and head and she played dead. She was the only survivor. She came back to school the next year, but people were horrible. There were nasty rumors about how she made it up, faked it, how it was her fault, etc. She's now engaged and in college. One of the strongest people I know, and such a sweetheart. People are horrible. I wasn't the intended target, but I could have died. I worked at small family-owned bicycle shop. My boss, the father of the family, was a pretty nice guy, as far as I knew him. Anyway, one day, I was rearranging displays and my boss's wife and kids were there. A pretty normal day until somebody slammed the shop door open and emptied a full pistol clip into the shop, specifically at my boss. I got on my stomach as soon as I knew what was happening and waited until I heard the guy running away. My boss was shot a couple times in the head and chest and was obviously dead on the spot. His daughter got hit in the upper arm and the wife broke her arm diving to the floor. I was kidnapped after being raped a few days prior. I'd threatened that I was going to the police and he flipped, abducting me and threatening murder-suicide. He drove more and more remote and I was tied up and helpless. He couldn't decide which way to kill me and I manipulated the frick out of his uncertainty. He had his whole hand around my throat at one point and I threw all pride and shame to the wind by telling him how much I loved him. He eventually let me go after I brought him to the hospital and promised to help him. Really felt like a coward after that. All I could think of was my kids and how I didn't want us to leave each other, but the fact I lied and told someone I loved them to get out of being murdered really freaking comes between me and my sleep at times. Doing whatever you need to escape is the right thing. Good job. I'm sorry you had to suffer through something so awful. Strangulation by a step-parent. When my strength and eyesight faded and I felt about to lose consciousness for the last time, they let up just a hair. Next thing I knew I was in another room with a locked door between us. Was primal crap. No idea how escaped. We'll never know if they experienced a brief moment of clarity that they could actually go to jail, lose their cash cow in the form of my bio parent, or if they thought the deed was done. They tried to break the door down and I considered jumping out the window, but I knew they would catch me before I reached the neighbor's house and they wouldn't fail a second time. Might even add the neighbors. And if I left, it'd be my bio parent for sure. The perfect bruises of their hands on my neck lasted weeks. Wore a scarf. They're still together. Frick this person and frick your parent for allowing this to happen. Holy crap. My twin sister and grandpa were killed during a home invasion. I should have been there, but I left to go give a drinking friend a ride home. When I came back there were police and tape and ambulances. Home invasion gone wrong, they were both killed execution style. She was 30. Love you GPA Felix. And the other half of my soul is already in the after with Amelia. I'm so sorry for your losses. Not sure if this counts, but had this neighbor kid I used to play with. A complete psycho. I was 4/5. He was a year or two older than me. One day he convinced me to walk well beyond the distance that my parents allowed me without an adult. Wanted to show me something, he said. We arrived at a small lake. He pointed at the water and said, look, there's tadpoles in there. Let's catch some. We don't have a net. You'll have to jump in and catch them with your hands. I told him I couldn't swim. He insisted. He told me he'd pull me up if I was drowning. I refused. He kept trying to convince me but eventually gave up. Said I was a coward. A friend of my mom saw us on our way back, and my mom wasn't very happy about the situation when she found out. 11 years later, I transferred schools and ended up in the same class as him. I figured my childhood memory of him was exaggerated. We talked about childhood memories. He told me how one of our neighbors, who was a cop, had screamed at him for no reason because he was playing with a cat. Remember this? I told him it was nice to see him have so many friends. He responded, friends? They're not my friends. Freaking kids. I only let them think I'm their friend, smiling the whole time. Figured he was joking. I later told my mom about having met him. She went quiet. I told her that he seemed to have turned out alright. Nothing more said. Couple of weeks later, I brought it up again. She said, as a mother, I'll never be able to trust that boy, and you shouldn't either. She went on to tell me how I was unable to sleep and cried a lot at night when I was a young kid. Reason being that he had told me he was planning to burn down our house and murder me and my family in our sleep, and about our neighbor screaming at him. Turns out he was actually caught torturing the poor cat. After that I avoided him. Thinking back, his behavior was off even as a young adult. He was clearly manipulative and lacked empathy. Final thoughts. Pretty sure he wanted to drown me that day and wanted it to seem like an accident. This gave me goosebumps. Holy buckets. Glad you're alive to tell the tale. My drunk ex-husband came home in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. He was pissed off at me for some unknown reason and got on top of me in bed and strangled me to the point where he thought he had killed me. When I came to, he was sitting on the side of the bed crying. He had choked me so badly that I had broken blood vessels in my eyes. I never spent another night under the same roof as him and we divorced soon after. I'm glad you made it out of there. There was a girl in the village of my parents' vacation home who was known to have mental health issues. My family never judged her for it. Both my parents are teachers and used to deal with slow students that say some wicked things every now and then. When I was 2, my parents went on vacation and so did that girl's family. That girl was 12. Both families were having lunch together and my parents left the girl to play with me. When my sister, 9 at the time, went to look for me, I was being drowned in a water tank by said girl, who was just looking at my sister smiling and saying some weird things. My sister screamed and my parents and the girl's family went to the rescue in time to save me. I have no memory of this, so all I know is the story my family told me a few times. I haven't actually met this girl yet, neither have I ever talked to her family. Both families still go on vacation to the same village at the same time, but my parents cut ties with them. I feel like I'm going to watch how my children play with others more closely moving forward. They are little dudes, and so vulnerable. I'm almost sure she'd have played it off as an accident if she wasn't interrupted. And I'm so freaking glad you have an older sister. A while back I was at my friend's house when a guy came in through a balcony glass door. He had climbed up to 2-story balcony and proceeded to start yelling at her things like, "Who is the moth Earth can now be?" and I stood up to protect her. It was dark and I couldn't see the knife in his hands, which he then stabbed me in the face with. Never met the guy or even knew his name. After I got out of hospital and started to try and figure out what was that all about, our mutual friend told me that he had asked the perk the same question and his answer was I was going to murder her but didn't know Sebler it was there also. I'm 23 and that was my second time getting stabbed and altogether I have 5 stabbing scars. WTF equals welcome to Finland. I didn't know Finland was so stabby. Growing up, one of my older cousins was a legit sociopath. He was on meds for oppositional defiant disorder. Some of the pettier things he did included blowing up caterpillars and frogs with firecrackers, keeping a stockpile of knives under his bed, stealing bikes, things of that nature. Sucker even stole my Egyptian Mew card. One day, when I was around 9-10 and he was 12-13, we were playing in his backyard with several other kids. For some reason he took an axe and threw it at me as hard as he could. It went right past my head and lodged in the tree behind me. No doubt in my mind he was aiming for my head and missed. To this day I still don't know why he did it. I've kept my distance from him ever since. He wasn't mad at me or anything. We were just playing. Lately I haven't heard much about him besides that a mutual friend stopped talking to him because he got them addicted to coke. And he posts a lot of homophobic crap on social media. Not me but my sister. She was working in retail sales at a large popular mall in a large city a few years ago. One day as she arrived at the mall for work, she stopped to use the restroom, the ones general mall goers would use. After using the restroom, she went to wash her hands when she noticed in the mirror that a man was standing behind her. She made eye contact with him and apparently gave him a nod of acknowledgement. The man was apparently holding a garbage bag he had gotten out of the roost room trash can and had fashioned it like a rope. He proceeded to approach my sister and wrap it around her neck, choking her and then slamming her on the ground. She doesn't remember much, but the security camera showed the man literally choke her unconscious and then stomped on her head repeatedly. The man fled and she was found by another mall goer. She was covered in blood and her face badly disfigured. She broke her jaw and lost several teeth. Long-term brain damage is still not known. He tried to kill her. He was a complete stranger, but the police think it was a gang initiation type of thing. The guy is now in jail for a very long time, and my sister has very severe PTSD from it. My mom's first husband was shot to death while he was in his car. He was a 71-year-old security guard. He was gunned down by two 20-year-olds as a gang initiation ritual. 2 weeks ago they both got sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. My father tried to choke me to death. I fought him off and beat the crap out of him. It was the last time he put hands on me, but the other abuse kept going. He died 12 years ago from cancer. I struggled with PTSD and alcoholism until he died. I got sober and haven't had a drink since he died. I see a therapist and take medication. I go to AA and now work with addicts and abused people. I have also chosen not to have children. I have no desire to ruin a human and am too afraid I would if I had a kid. My mother, who was also an abuser, died 3 years ago from a heat attack. What did I do? I survived them. I never gave in. I grew and healed and now I help other survivors. Thank you for letting me share my experience. If you are abused or have survived attempted murder, it doesn't have to rule your life. You are not alone. You can heal too. Thanks for the inspiration. Kind stranger. Oh boy, I just woke up, but this is finally a Reddit question I have an answer to. I was waiting at the bus stop. It was only me and an older woman waiting there. I had received a phone call from my partner a few moments earlier about how there had been a stabbing and that I should stay safe. A few minutes after that call, a man crossed the road, walked up to me and hit me over the head with a wooden fence post. I blacked out. Not sure how long it was for, but I came to on the floor with blood spilling out from my head. It's foggy. I don't remember his face, but I know I looked up, said, "What the frick?" over and over. I somehow managed to stand up and run. I don't think he expected me to get up and was put off guard. I know now that around 30 minutes before hitting me, this man had stabbed and killed a 24-year-old man. I often think about how if I hadn't woken up in that moment, I most likely would have been killed. This guy had done it before. He had the capacity to. I ran across the road, almost getting hit by a car, and made it to a pharmacy where amazing staff took care of me while we waited for an ambulance. I apologized many times for getting so much blood on their floor. I remember finding my wallet and phone in my pockets. Realizing that this guy did what he did solely to hurt me made me break into tears. I made it to hospital, gave a 12-page statement to the police. They took my clothes as evidence. My favorite Baylor Club shirt, which was covered in my blood. I'm still mad I wore it that day. I got 7 stitches in my head. I passed out when getting them. My family smuggled in some McDonald's and I requested some earphones because I knew I wouldn't sleep that night. I think I listened to like 5 Giant Bomb podcasts that night. Sorry, this is disjointed. These are just the things I remember. It was a long recovery. Lots of hard moments. It really shakes your trust in strangers when one tries to kill you unprovoked. 2 years after, there was a trial where they sent him to a mental prison. It was a long week. While there, I met the mother of the man he had killed. She cried throughout every day. When I met her, I completely froze. I couldn't say anything. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, even though I did nothing. When I was a kid, my father got into a relationship with a rather strange, but still kind woman. She had a son, who was only a couple years older than me. At the time I didn't think anything of their relationship, but looking back at it, it was very abusive. They got into fights often, most of them turning physical, even when both me and my father were present. The kid would always try to push me over and hit me, but I would never say anything to my father because I didn't want to ruin his relationship. Now here's where my memory gets hazy, so take the details with a grain of salt. My father and his then girlfriend were having a conversation, while I and her son were a few meters away from them. He once again tried to hit me, at which I sat on top of him to prevent that. I was a really fat kid and he was very skinny, so despite the age difference, this somehow worked. I told him I would get up if he left me alone, and since he promised to do so, I just sat beside him. He proceeded to get on top of me and strangle me. I remember trying to cry out for help and reaching out to my father, but not being able to make a single sound and feeling like I was being pulled away from him. I'm pretty sure I passed out after that, or was at least very close, because after that I only remember that my father's girlfriend and her son were now gone. I never saw them again, though the last I heard of them was years later, after my dad received an anti-wedding invitation from her. From what my dad told me, she was angry at her son, but was even more pissed at my dad for ending the relationship. I'm pretty sure he didn't really intend to actually murder me, but then again, what is the intention of trying to strangle a 7-8-year-old kid? All in all, this was surprisingly less traumatizing than you think it would be. TLDR. Father's ex-girlfriend's son tried to strangle me. Your dad is a real one for ending the relationship right then and there. My fiance at the time was annoyed with what I had worn on a night out. The evening at the club was normal enough until it got later in the evening, and he was annoyed I was talking to my friends. He grabbed me by the throat and had me literally off the ground. My friends managed to get him off me, so he took my bag with my keys, phone, wallet etc. and left me at the club. I had nowhere else to go, so had to home. When I got in, he started to rape me, then was strangling me at the same time. I passed out and don't really know what happened after then. When I came to, I was covered in scratches and bruises and couldn't turn my neck. My throat was sore for ages, so I could barely speak. I ran into a friend the next morning and broke down. Found a new place and moved out as quickly as I could. Didn't tell him where I was going and left the uni that we were both at. It wasn't the only time he tried to kill me, but it was the one that was the wake-up call. Not me, but my mom. A man entered her house just before lunchtime and stabbed her and her maid multiple times. He also kept punching both of them while stabbing them. Eventually he got tired and left. My mom played dead. Then when she was sure that they were alone, she checked on the maid to see if she was still alive. Both of them survived the attack, but the police never found the guy. The thing is, my mom knows the guy. See, she owns a flower shop and has 2 people working for her. One of them is this nice gay guy, and that guy had a boyfriend. It was the boyfriend who attacked my mom, and my mom told me that he was high and was looking for money. It seemed like his boyfriend didn't want to give him money that day, so he decided to attack his BF's employer instead. Since then, my vibrant, outgoing mom became reclusive and she developed various health conditions. She's also always in a state of pain, which led her to become dependent on pain meds. The meds ruined her kidneys and liver, and now she's undergoing dialysis for it. I am so sorry. My stepfather decided he'd had enough one night and tried to murder my family. My brother and I survived. My mother did not. To fill in some blanks, I don't think there was any warning about what was going to happen. The night it happened, he shot my mother, came upstairs, shot me, shot at my brother, and then shot himself. He survived until he reached the hospital, but he didn't make it despite their attempts. So no, he wasn't punished or locked up. I guess I'm glad, or I might have always been looking over my shoulder in case he got released. Yes, it was on the news, which was horrible because everyone at my school knew all about it. When I was just trying to live with some kind of normalcy, it was out there for all to know. I just wanted to be treated the same so I could pretend like things were the same. I found out a few details years later, and just when I thought I had kind of accepted it all, it turns out my mum was getting ready to leave him. Not only might she have been spared what happened to her, but she wanted to get back together with my dad. So that's pretty much the story. I have so many questions. I'll just say I'm very sorry for your loss. There was this guy who I used to chat with at the bar. He was a little weird, but seemed lonely, so I would talk to him because I felt a little sorry for him. This went on for months, and eventually he asked me out, and as tactfully as I could I said no, I wasn't interested in seeing anyone now, and I thought he was okay with it. He'd do and say the occasional inappropriate thing that made me feel uneasy, but not bad enough to be rude or make him feel alone, and we both liked horses. So that's pretty much what we talked about. I thought he was fine with this and things went on as before. But then he came in with a friend from work and I was sitting with them, and the friend was extremely obnoxious and loudly making all these rape and GHB jokes. Like he just wouldn't stop even after I said he was making me feel uncomfortable. He said in a condescending tone, "You don't really think we are going to rape you, do you?" And I felt stupid and ashamed and said no, but they kept going on, and finally I said I was going to the washroom and please get the jokes out of your system while I'm gone or I'll leave. That was very stupid and it gave them time to dose my drink. Now it doesn't make you pass out like men assume, but it kind of makes you a suggestible zombie but also get drunk a lot faster, or enhances the effects of the alcohol, whatever. Anyway, he told my other friends I wasn't well and he's going to take me home and I'll be safe, and after that I don't remember anything till being in his room and the assault happening. It was surreal, like I was floating through the ceiling watching what was happening from above and trying to will my body to get up, run, get up, run, get up, run. But it was like a marionette with the strings cut. Then he pushed my shoulder really hard and I heard a low snap and I rushed back into my body and I had the sensation of dying, of being drowned in blackness. Much later I woke up and it was day as there was light coming around the curtains and I managed to find my things and get out, but I have PTSD from it to this day and I need a cane to walk. Also, the police did nothing, so I also have PTSD from the patronizing way I was treated by the police after this. When I was living overseas, a man broke into my apartment. He came in through the window of my studio apartment at about 5:30 in the morning. Thankfully, I was awake. He started to go attack me and tried to strangle me. I was able to fight him off by getting my feet up onto his chest and pushing with all my strength. This happened a few times. The only thing he would say was, "You die, you die." He was slender and I don't think he was very prepared and I don't think he expected me to fight back. Partway through this, when I realized that he wasn't giving up, is when I really started to get scared and think to myself that I needed a plan and to get out of there. My friend lived next door, so I decided I was going to make a run for it. Once I stood up, he ran back out the window. I grabbed my glasses and my phone and ran to my friend's apartment. Thankfully she was awake. I told her what happened and she was like, "You have to call the police by this time." Shock was starting to set in and for some reason, my brain was telling me, "I am okay." So nothing happened. She kept reiterating that I needed to call the police. I decided to call one of my co-workers who spoke English really well and ask her. This co-worker was horrified at what happened and immediately said that she was going to call the police for me and call me back. Once the police arrived, she acted as the translator to tell them what happened. I have a schizophrenic brother who started an argument when late teens over my dad giving me his old iPhone. He decided a rational tactic was to chase me with a chainsaw, then try to chainsaw my car. Police came but not before he broke my mother's ribs. I've had an intervention order against him since and don't consider him family. Solo hiking. Ran into two men who acted nice at first, then started following me on my trail. Things escalated. They beat me up pretty bad while trying to rape me. I fought like fury. I'm fit and used to do combat sports, so I was able to do quite a bit of damage right back. I think when they realized they themselves were taking too many hits, they cut their losses and fled. I have no doubt they would have killed me as well as raped me if I hadn't made it such an unholy battle for them to get me down. I was a mess, and still needed to hike back to civilization after that. I could write a freaking book about that return hike. Eventually I made it out. I don't talk about it, like ever. I guess Reddit is as good a spot as any to put it down. I fought like fury. Frick yeah, I'm very sorry this happened to you. This quote is inspirational AF. I have a daughter I'm gradually teaching self-defense to as she gets older. I'm going to borrow this line and tell her this story. I'm glad you made those bastards suffer. What moment made you say yep, I'm definitely dead, but survived with no major injuries? Not me, but my mom before I was born. She was riding in a convertible with a friend of hers. They came to an intersection and the friend wasn't paying attention and lost control of the vehicle. There was a big rig going through the intersection and they went right under the trailer. My mom ducked. The driver didn't not. Driver was decapitated. My mom was lucky and only ended up with a scalp full of glass and some serious psychological trauma. She had to get over 200 stitches in her scalp but nothing else significant. I think about it all the time and think how close I came to never being born at all. I've had almost the same dang thing happen. My friend's tiny Corvette was slammed into by a semi who ran a red light. I walked away with a seatbelt rash. My friend was mostly blinded by glass but zero other injuries. I was a senior in high school, and the student club I was in organized an unofficial beach trip towards the end of the year. No teachers or official permission, leaving me and a few other seniors in charge of supervising everything. After a couple hours worth of fun, one of the other students came running up to me and said that 3 of the younger members of the club had been swept out by a riptide and couldn't get back towards the shore. Me and 2 other of the older students, all experienced swimmers, immediately went to go help them. My friends got 2 of the 3 kids in trouble and started guiding them parallel to the shore to get them out of the current. But the guy I went for was panicking, barely staying above the water, and started dragging me. I yelled for people to get a lifeguard and tried to keep both of us afloat. But after a few minutes, maybe 5, maybe 10, it felt like forever. I was getting exhausted, having trouble keeping both of us above the water, and I couldn't see anyone coming to the rescue. I started getting big mouthfuls of water and my leg muscles were starting to cramp up, and I remember thinking, holy crap, I might actually die right here, right now, as the current started pulling us further and further away from where everyone was. Thankfully for everyone involved, one of the students on the beach had flagged down a couple of surfers, who made their way out to where we were as quickly as they could and hauled first the younger student and then me onto the front of their boards and took us back to shore. I'll always be thankful and appreciative for those strangers who put themselves in the dangerous position of rescuing 2 drowning swimmers. In those situations I've been told to swim down. The other person doesn't want to go down and might let go. Other than that, I watched a lifeguard punch someone in the face a few times when they were clinging and dragging them both down. I was at the end of a 2-hour journey about 10 minutes from home, pretty rural, and I was probably complacent because I took that road every day. I took a bend at 40 miles per hour. Legal limit was 60 miles per hour, so wasn't breaking any speeding rules, which I've done many times before. Probably faster, which looking back was really reckless. I didn't see until it was too late that a car had spun out on the other side of the corner and another car had pulled up to help. I slammed on, but I wasn't going to stop in time before hitting the cars pulled up crashed. I was hurtling straight towards the other cars and people who were stood in the road from the other crash. It was like time slowed down and I was at a crossroads. In my mind I had 3 choices: continue on my path and hit the other cars and people, veer to the right and go into a field, but there was oncoming traffic and there was a chance I'd hit them, or veer to the left and fly into a wooded area. I chose the last option. And in that moment I knew the chances of me surviving or not being seriously injured after a 40-mile-per-hour head-on collision to a tree in a 10-year-old Ford Ka was pretty slim. I just felt a complete peace come over me, turned the wheel and woke up slumped over the steering wheel to some poor man shouting, "OMG, I think she's dead." Turned out I passed out from shock or something before the impact, so when I hit the tree I was completely floppy, and this contributed to me having no serious injuries. The front of my car was completely disintegrated. After coming to, I tried to put my clutch down to take the car out of gear out of habit, and my foot hit the tree trunk. The tree was absolutely fine. I drove past the tree every day for years after, and you could see the chunk my car took out of it. I had an idiot friend and we were hiking. We got to this waterfall and he goes, "Dude, let's climb it." I said, "No freaking way." He says, "Well, I'm gonna do it, and if I fall and die it's on you for not coming." So I climbed it with him. Got stuck halfway up on a slit butt rock. Pinched a nerve in my shoulder, so my right arm was useless. I thought I was certain to slip off the rock to my doom, but we managed to get me unstuck. That was the beginning of the end for that friendship. I survived a car crash that wrecked my car. Rolled twice, landed upside down, learned the hard way that I didn't have airbags, or at least they didn't deploy. Did have my seatbelt on though, that probably saved me. Paramedic said he hadn't seen a wreckage like that and have it end well. Not even a hairline fracture. You'd be a mushed raisin if not for your seatbelt. Well done. I went out for a surf on a stormy day and thought to myself, no one else is out. Those idiots. Before being held down by 2 waves after eating it on the first wave of the set. First wave of the session. Was thrown down and held under, and while being tossed around my leg rope wrapped around both my legs and one of my arms, so I was probably being held at around 5 feet under with only one arm free while my board tombstoned. Board tip is barely visible at the surface but floats vertical like a tombstone. Finally managed to catch a breath between sets before taking another 3 or 4 on the head and for sure just thought, well this is it. No one's out. Fisherman will find my body or my board. Managed to get my other arm free and got to shore very quickly and then avoided the ocean for a few days even though the waves were absolutely perfect. There's a reason no one was out. Everyone else was 10 minutes down the road at another beach where the waves were smaller and cleaner. I was in an extremely similar situation, but it was at a comp. Held a beater or 2 under for what felt like minutes. I genuinely just pretty much accepted I was dead. Tire popped going over a 2-lane road with steep drops on both sides. My car jerked to the side hard, and my car went sideways. Half my car hung over the side and luckily it's low so it bottomed out. I climbed into the back seat and jumped out the back door. Some dude in a truck pulled me out and I drove on a flat to the other side and swapped my tire out. I swear it's always some dude in a truck ready to help. They're either the best people ever or jerks. Parachute deployed but failed to open. That was one of those moments. Then training kicked in. Cut away, failed shoot. Deploy secondary. But for a brief moment life was about to be over in my mind. Went whitewater rafting on the Gorley River and my raft flipped on Pillow Rock, one of the most famous Class V rapids. Scariest moment of my life, but other than unexpectedly swallowing some water and almost vomiting, I came out completely unharmed. Man, Pillow Rock is no joke. Out of all the obstacles, that one always make the butt pucker just a little bit more. I ride with river expeditions and have always had fantastic guides. I took my 13YO with me this last trip and he said he's never been more terrified and excited at the same time. I was driving down a highway, doing 65 miles per hour, and suddenly my car started to shake. I tapped the brakes in reflex and my entire car flipped 180 degrees. I'm now facing oncoming traffic, including a semi-truck. I was so close I couldn't see the driver compartment. I screamed and jerked the wheel, bringing me in front of a sedan with 2 people screaming as they watched me appear out of nowhere. I kept screaming and floored the gas pedal, made it to the side of the road and cried for a long time. I had blown a rear tire. Hitting the brakes was a terrible choice. What are you supposed to do, because I'm sure I would hit the brakes too. When I was a kid I was playing hide and seek with my siblings and I got the brilliant idea to hide in the trunk of the car. I meant to leave the trunk barely open so that it didn't latch but accidentally closed it too far and it latched. Mind you, this was before they put handles in cars to open trunks from the inside, so I was legitimately stuck. It was almost completely dark so I started seriously freaking out and I thought I was going to die. So I started yelling for help as loud as I could and was kicking at the back seat thinking maybe I could break the latch that keeps the seat from folding. I was probably only in there for about 5 minutes before someone heard me and let me out, but it felt like an eternity. To this day I firmly believe it was because of this incident that I developed some minor claustrophobia. I still have serious fears about being in small, cramped and dark areas. I have a friend whose brother died in the trunk of the car playing hide and seek. It got too hot and he couldn't get out. So sad. I'm glad you made it. I was driving home from college on one of those highways with only one lane in either direction and no shoulder. A guy in the oncoming lane didn't see me as I was in a small car. He thought he could pass 4 18-wheelers in one go and pulled into my lane going at least 90. There was nowhere for me to go. He flew off into the ditch to avoid hitting me head on. Likely did severe damage to his car, but I lived. I ate one of those Branches oval shaped hard candies. Think they were called sparklets, at home alone when I was 6. Got stuck in my throat. I stood there in shock for a few seconds as I started to realize I couldn't breathe. I ran crazily around the room and ended up colliding hard into the back of the couch, which caused the candy to go flying out. Best accidental Heimlich ever. When I was 18 I was driving through an intersection with the right of way, going 70 km/h, or 43.5 mph. A man in a blue Mazda 3 hatchback decided to run the red light turning left. He was so close to me that I could see the whites of his eyes. and in a split second I thought I'm about to T-bone this guy. Driver side door and he is going to die. Instinctively I yanked on the wheel and swerved to the right and instantly went over the curb and off the road, onto someone's lawn. I slammed the brakes, but because I was on grass the tires locked and the car kept momentum. I went through their wooden fence and garden, and straight into the brick wall on the side of their house. As soon as I went off the road, I 100% thought I was going to die. My life didn't flash before my eyes, but people close to me did. It could have only been a second or two, but time seemed to slow down and my brain was racing. I thought about how my girlfriend would react, what my parents would say, what my friends would think, etc. When the car hit the wall it punched a few bricks out of place and the entire front end of the vehicle caved in. The windows shattered, the tires exploded, the doors bent into an L shape and the car started to fill with smoke. However, the radio was still playing Vicarious by Tool. I was concussed by the airbag, broke my nose, jaw, 2 fingers, had whiplash and my left knee was dislocated. I was in shock and couldn't believe that what just happened was real, and so I just sat there kinda freaking out. A group of parents from a birthday party across the street saw what happened and ran to the car and pulled me from it as they thought it was about to catch fire. The man in the Mazda 3 drove away. If it wasn't for the testimony of those parents who told the police they witnessed the man run the intersection and that I didn't do anything wrong, I would have been completely liable for all of the property damage, and additionally insurance would not have replaced the vehicle as it would have been deemed at fault. I am glad nobody else got hurt. Fell asleep driving through the night with my brothers. They were supposed to stay awake and help me stay awake, but were out cold. I woke up as the right front tire kissed the gravel on the side of the highway, ripped the wheel to the left, and managed only to spin out. Weird thing was, while it was happening, I was crystal clear, fully focused, and totally in control, as if time had slowed down, but thinking that we were all dead. Power napping works. Pull over, set your alarm for 15-20 minutes and sleep. It's a full reset on your brain. The hood on my car came open at 60 on the highway and completely blocked my sights in heavy traffic. I panicked and jerked the wheel a little bit, which caused me to fishtail a little bit. I crap you not. My driver's education teacher's words from 5 years prior rang in my head to lean down and look through the space at the bottom of the hood. I pulled over and used some wire I found in the trunk to keep the hood closed. Anytime you close your hood, make sure it latches securely by pulling on the hood like you're trying to lift the front of the car off the ground. I was driving on the turnpike in my Mazda 3 in the hard rain. It was 3 lanes and I was in the left lane doing 55, and then I hit standing water and hydroplaned. I did a full 360 spin across all 3 lanes of traffic and ended up in the shoulder stopped. I didn't hit anyone or anything. No one hit me, and one car was so scared with me they also pulled over, but didn't check on me. To this day I'm still a bit scared in the rain. I've done nearly the exact same thing in a 3, except it went from right lane to the left lane, to the shoulder, and I did bounce off the guardrail, so needed to repair that part. But I hit water, did a 360 across 3 lanes of traffic with no one else nearby. When both the stewardess and pilot at different times came on the loudspeaker of the plane saying they are doing their best to land safely, then seeing the fire engines and other emergency vehicles on the runway waiting for us. The plane landed fine, but as it was going for the landing a weird calm came over me because I knew I wasn't going to make it, and that was fine. A really bad flash fire at work where I jumped into a pit to get away from the heat. I saw the flames roll right over top of the pit. I thought for sure I was going to die. I got some wicked 3rd-degree burns, but I lived. I was drunk and running in the woods when bam, barbed wire went straight to the throat. The last thing I remember, I couldn't breathe and was passing out and there was blood squirting from my neck. Woke up an hour later and walked home looking like a murder victim. My dad once took some barbed wire to the throat too. It happened before I was born and I can't remember all the details. But I do remember my mom recounting how he showed back up at the house with blood running down his body. Mom couldn't handle it and left the room. To be fair, she was only like 18 at the time. Thankfully, her mom was around and leapt in to help. My friend put me in a fold-out couch when we were 12. Unaware of how to get me back out because of the weight and pressure on me, I started to panic and scream, making it worse. He cut me out of the center of it like a burrito C-section. My friend's stepfather was an extremely abusive drill instructor. The beating he took was terrible. But that's my story. Emergency C-section from a fold-up couch. That's tough, cause he knew he was gonna get it but still got you out. Sounds like a good dude. Had a paintball fight on Christmas morning with two cousins and their neighbor kid at around 13 years old with our brand new guns we got as gifts. The neighbor got mad, ran home, came back with a shotgun, and pointed at my face. All I remember is looking at the ground and waiting to die. My friend and I just spent a few days at a beach shack. My friend just got her P plates. She was super excited, so she wanted to drive us home. This was one of her first times driving alone. Being 17, we didn't really see an issue. I rang my dad beforehand and told him I was getting a lift. He said, "I don't think you should do that. I can come pick you up. I can drive some of the girls home too. I think you guys should wait until she's had more experience." Of course, being 17, thinking I knew everything, I said it was fine and I was hopping in her car. We were on our way home, playing music and chatting. There were 5 17-year-olds in this car. I was sitting behind the driver's seat. My friend pulls out onto a 2-1 expressway from a country road, like an intersection. We notice she's turned the wrong way and tell her to make a U-turn. She pulls to the side and decides to go for it, through 2 lanes. She didn't check her mirrors properly and a large truck was coming up behind us. My friend got frightened and put her foot on the brake in the middle of both lanes. We were all screaming at her to keep driving, but she was frozen. I remember, it was like slow motion. I looked at every single one of my friends. We all kind of shared a moment of fear, like this is it I guess. The exchange looks haunt me tbh. We could hear the truck horn blaring at us. I looked out my window to the truck driving toward us. I locked eyes with the truck driver. Luckily the truck stopped about 5 meters away from us. She pulled away and was really upset. The car was silent the entire way back. It was honestly the scariest moment. I am from a really small town and I think losing 5 people at once would really rock it. Seeing my friends' faces in that moment, it was actually horrific. I did have a moment of okay, here comes the truck. It was oddly peaceful. After that day I have a real understanding that I'm mortal and can go at any minute. Oh, and to trust my dad. I had leg cramp and a momentary blackout when swimming in a diving pool when I was 16. I was really active that I overexert my limit. Surprisingly I didn't really panicked. Just the dreadful thought, oh crap, I'm fricked. Funny thing is that I didn't really wingle my hands out of the pool panickingly like I usually see in the TV, just silently sinking. Good thing the pool guard on duty noticed me and went for my rescue by pulling me out. Really wish I thanked the guard more that he saved me instead of me cluelessly sitting outside the lobby after the accident. The thing is, very rarely do people flail their hands in panic when they drown. Usually they just stay still with their mouth and nose submerged underwater. What you want to look for is not the panic, but the responsiveness. One of my most surreal experiences of my life, I had a lot of weird ones around this time, was riding my bike on the sidewalk next to an extremely busy road at night. I hit something on the sidewalk, I don't know what, and tumbled sideways into the street. As I fell, I saw the road light up from headlights from a car behind me, and when I hit the asphalt, I just lay there because I knew I couldn't get out of the way in time. After a second or so I wasn't dead, so I looked around and the street was empty. It wasn't empty when I fell. There were cars going in both directions. That was 20+ years ago and I'm still not entirely convinced that I didn't die. It's possible that I imagined the headlights, but that road is never empty like it was. It's a major street in a major city. It always has cars on it, even at 3 AM. It was the first of many experiences that led me down a path of questioning the nature of reality. You've switched to an alternative timeline where there were no cars on the road at that split second. I'm a skier. On a few occasions I have caught an edge at a pretty high speed, 50+ mph or more. That moment when you feel both skis leave the ground when they are not supposed to is horrifying. Somehow I've never had anything more than some moderate whiplash and a sprained wrist. Knock on wood. Skier here too. I'm just standing in my kitchen reading both skis leave the ground when not supposed to, and there's instantly this super unsettling feeling. Even if it's not close to dying, you just never know 100% if you land safely or end up limping around with 2 fricked knees for the rest of your life. Probably what makes skiing so exciting. Stay safe, fellow skier. Yesterday morning when I slipped on some wet tin on a roof, my safety cable didn't activate. Luckily my co-worker caught me. That's about as close as I've gotten so far. Once as a kid I was in the backyard swimming while my family was nearby eating dinner at a round table. Most had their backs to me, but I was like 11 and an experienced swimmer. I got into a toddler's float with leg holes. It ended up flipping over and I was stuck in it. My legs wouldn't come out of the leg holes. I kicked and thrashed as much as I could, but I was so stuck. And you can't hear someone screaming underwater. So many thoughts ran through my head. Mostly how sad I was that my parents were about to find me dead in a matter of minutes, and how they'd never forgive themselves for allowing me to silently drown as they talked with friends. I tried one more time to kick with all of my might. One leg slipped out and I was able to get the other out after. I was fine. Totally freaking spooked, but physically okay. Oh, I actually have a story that fits. I was coming home from a party at 2 AM in 2016 and made a conscious choice to drive through town rather than take the big highway that skirts the city limits. It would add like 10 minutes to the trip, but hey, it was the first time I'd been back in ages. That decision literally almost killed me. Not even 5 minutes after that, the 3-lane highway, really just a wide road, passed in front of them all, and there was a signal light there. Well, some drunk idiot decided to turn right into the mall from the far left lane, and I was in the middle lane. I had absolutely no time to stop, so I slammed into the side of his car at 65 miles per hour. I remembered yelling SHITTT and trying to keep control of the wheels to get the car off the road onto the grass before I blacked out for a few minutes. The airbag and the seatbelt combined had fractured my sternum, which took the air out of my lungs and made me faint, I guess. But it didn't feel like I woke up, more so like my vision came back into focus and I was aware. But those few moments I was still kind of conscious and in immense pain. Worst I've ever felt in my life. I hurt from the skin on the soles of my feet to my scalp. Every single inch was in pain and I was like, so I'm dead. This is my body telling me I'm dead. So when I came to, heat hit me cause my car was fricked and the engine was as hot as standing in a fire. So I was convinced my car was about to go up. It didn't. So I tried to get out, but the door was wedged shut from the crash and I started to panic. I put my back against the passenger seat and kicked the door over and over until it opened and climbed out. Every single police officer, EMT, and even the tow truck guy took one look at my car and told me you shouldn't have walked away from that crash at all. The fact that all you have is a fracture and some lacerations is a literal miracle. So yeah, that's how I almost died and thought for sure I was dead, but got lucky. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.